What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you as usual. It's Saturday morning, baby. You know the drill on Saturday. We're going for probably about 2 hours. I'm going to try to get this done before that. I'm starting a little bit earlier than I have been the last couple of weeks, so hopefully we can get this done before the noon slate kicks off. I do have at least one, maybe two noon college basketball games with plays today. I've got, I believe, a 12:30 Eastern Time NHL play as well, so we got to get into it, man. Hopefully we can get it done. Like I said, we try not to go 2 hours today, but it is the start of March, baby. So I consider it to be March Madness, basically as soon as the conference tournaments start. And I believe we have the Atlantic Sun is going to be the first one to start. I believe it starts tomorrow with the probably 8 through 11 seeds. I don't even how many teams are in that conference. I have no idea, but the bottom like 4 teams I think are playing tomorrow. So anytime it's a tournament game, even if they're crappy teams, it's always pretty exciting, man. So it's beginning. And today, we have a bunch of regular season late college basketball, which I do like some of the spots that get set up here. So I'm going to have, I believe, 8 or maybe 9. I think I have 9 college basketball plays today, and that's me being selective. I have 2 NHL plays, and I got 1 NBA play, which is on the ugliest it's the ugliest NBA game and play that you could possibly think of. So you probably know what it is just by me saying that. But I like the spot for it. Of course, I'm wearing my Boston College Eagles hat here because they're so good this year, baby. They're out on the West Coast right now and having a terrible season. They're never going to be good again, man. We're never going to get back to the days of BC with the Jared Dudley days when I was in college. I think I accidentally mentioned his name when I talked about going to see them in high school, but he was there during my college days. During high school, it was, like Troy Bell, those guys. Jonathan Beerbaum, my favorite. Anyway, last night we went 3-0, baby. I mean, I'm on an 8-0 run over the last 2 nights. The new peak has become even greater, man. We're peaking, so as long as today goes reasonably well, it will continue. I finished February very hot. A winning February, even though I had a horrific start to February, turned it around completely. Had a really nice February in the end of it. Finished both months of the year strong so far. We're up on the year somewhat significantly right now, so hopefully that's going to continue. Hopefully we don't tank the whole thing, but I do what I do, man. Hopefully it's consistent. Dave Smith is the most consistent motherfucker politically. I'm the most consistent motherfucker in sports betting. So that's what I'm going to label myself now. I don't even remember. What were my plays last night? I don't even remember. Oh, I had Purdue. Purdue was out to like a double-digit lead early, and then they blew the whole thing. But, I mean, it was a low-scoring game, which I kind of expected. Both teams play slow defensively, but I was getting a little bit antsy. But then Purdue went on a nice run after they actually wound up in a tied game in the second half. And then Purdue went on like a 12-1 run or something. And I'm like, okay, this is going to put this game away. It did. We get the win for Purdue. I think they won by double digits, maybe 10. And then, meanwhile, basketball, the Phoenix Suns was pretty much no sweat in that zigzag spot. Easy win for the Suns. That line went up to 8 by the time the game tipped off. But, I mean, if you played it at any number, you still won on the Phoenix Suns. So I recommended probably playing it up to about 7 because that's usually the 3-score threshold. That is the 3-score threshold in basketball. And then the Utah Jazz with an outright win. Man, the Jazz are my new Detroit Pistons, I think, even though the Pistons won for me a couple days ago, too. The Jazz, they've been winning for me as a home underdog this year, man. So, root for Utah as far as me referencing Celtic pride there with where the crazed Celtics fans kidnapped the star player of the Utah Jazz, and then the ultimatum. I'm going to spoil it, sorry, but it's an old movie. Go watch the movie. It's hilarious. It won't ruin the comedy of it, but the star player basically gets away, and then he gives them an ultimatum, which is basically that he won't turn them into the cops if they root for Utah against the Celtics. Oh, my God. Root for Utah. All right. Let's get into today, man. This is gonna be fun. I'm gonna break down a bunch of these college basketball games and hopefully run through them quick. As I always say, it's at least a little bit of a shorter card now that conference tournaments are gonna start. At least with the Atlantic Sun, they don't have any games today. I think so. That takes one small conference off the board, baby. Clemson is at Virginia on ESPN2 at noon Eastern in this noon slate as the day starts. starts to warm up a little bit, I guess we'll say. Clemson, I mean, they're pretty secure in their tournament spot now, so I don't know that going to Virginia is really a spot where you really want to look to play Clemson, and they're going to be laying points, right? They're laying 7 points, 79% of tickets, only 66% of the cash. We know Virginia, we know what they do. They play ridiculously slow basketball and try to get that thing into a low-scoring half-court game, which is fairly conducive to covering as a home underdog, but Virginia's coming off a big win over Wake Forest, man. That was a horrific loss for Wake Forest. That loss really, really hurts Wake Forest as far as the tournament chances. I'm reasonably certain they're not going to get in now because mostly because of that loss, but I guess because of kind of their recent play leading up to it too, a loss to Florida State in there. As I do my bracketology, I have Wake Forest as like the 6th team out of the field right now, so out of the first 4, I mean, so that's not good that they have that many teams ahead of them, even to get into the first 4. But Virginia, yeah, coming off that big upset of Wake, coming back home. They did lose last time in this Florida Duke. So, I mean, they may still be motivated because they do have a ranked team coming into their place. But I do lean to Virginia, but I'm not going to try to play it after they pulled off that upset. What I am going to do, though, is play this other home underdog here, which is Penn State plus 5.5. This is the first game that I played. I looked at it last night, and I'm like, here we go, baby. This is noon on the Big Ten Network. You got ranked number 16 Maryland. And Maryland, yeah, they're a good team, but this is not a good spot for them. They're actually down from 5.5 to 4.5 now. So the line is moving in my direction. I think there got to probably still be 5s out there because there were when I looked not long ago this morning. 73% of tickets, only 62% of the cash on Maryland. Maryland is looking like one of those like very typical public road favorites here as a ranked team. The public is going to be all over Maryland, and I want no part of it in this spot, man. And Maryland, yeah, they've been rolling along. We know they're going to make the tournament. They're a good team. They are deserving of their ranking, but what are they coming off of? This game against Michigan State, where I had Maryland in this game. I thought it was a good spot to play Maryland in this game. They were behind for a lot of it. They fell behind in the second half. They were behind late in the game right here. They were down 7 in the final 3 minutes. Made the comeback to tie the game. And then what did they do? They had the ball with like a decent amount of time left, really, and they took a bad 3 still with 5 seconds left on the shot clock when they could have really, what are you doing in a tied game, right? Why are you taking a bad shot with time still left? No. At worst, you take a shot at the buzzer, man. So at worst, you're gonna make sure it goes into overtime. Take the last shot, but try to get it into the paint, man. Try to get fouled. You know, the refs might help you out a little bit at home. I talked about this after it happened, but that's not what they did. So they jacked up that 3 with 5 seconds to go, missed. Michigan State got the rebound and had time to fling it up from like 3/4 court, and it went in. And that's how Maryland lost the game on a 3/4 court 3-point shot, basically right at the buzzer. You got to be kidding me. Now Maryland is coming off of that game against Michigan State. They got to go on the road to face Penn State, which Penn State, I actually think they're better than they look. They're sitting way down at the bottom of the conference, so they're really not going to attract any attention at all, but I think they're probably better than some of these teams that are kind of around where they are in the conference. I think Penn State, I've been saying it for a while, they're a little bit undervalued, and I've picked some spots with Penn State. I think they've won twice for me, and maybe they've lost once or twice, but still, bad spot for Maryland. Who do they have up next? They got Michigan, a ranked Michigan team, so they're in a Michigan sandwich here. And then after that, they got Northwestern, which is Maryland's final home game, so that's senior day for Maryland next Saturday, I believe. And they lost at Northwestern, so that's going to be an extra big game for Maryland as well. Because of that, it'll be revenge. This is a terrible spot, dude. And I don't think they played Penn State this year. Let me make sure of that. No, they have not. I don't like the spot whatsoever here. Penn State coming off multiple losses. I mean, they don't want to fall to 500, man. They're going to want to try to bounce back. And not only that, but guess whose senior day it is today? Yeah, that would be Penn State. So even though, yeah, they have Wisconsin up next, but they're not going to overlook Maryland, a ranked Maryland team on senior day at home. No, Penn State's going to show up with focus. They're going to show up with motivation here. They've lost so many recent games, it's ridiculous. 7 or 8 of their last 10 games have been losses. A lot of them were on the road, though. More than half of them, I think, were on the road. So not that easy. They won one of those games on the road, but 6 of those games were on the road, and 5 of those road games were losses. Penn State, again, I mean, some of them were Pacific Coast, too. I think they're going to have the bounce back here. Yeah, they just played Indiana, which is a reasonably big game, but I mean, come on. You know they're going to be focused for all those reasons I just said. The market looks to be in agreement with this. If you look at Ken Palm, although I actually should have it up still. I thought I had Ken Palm up. What did I do? Hold on. Where is it? Even though sometimes I don't love to show Ken Palm because I do pay for it, but what can you do? Come on, man. I'm trying to move this. I had the tab open. I'm trying to move it over. Firefox is just being a pain in the ass right now, man. Here it is. All right, so we got Ken Palm here. Look at this quickly. Yeah, he's got Maryland exactly 16th in the country, actually. And yeah, they're really good. They're balanced. But they play fast. Penn State also plays fast, whatever. Where is Penn State at? They're down at 65th. But Penn State is one of the most unlucky teams in the country, according to Ken Palm. They're like a bottom 15 in luck, which means that they are better than their record indicates, man. That is what Ken Palm is telling you. They're way down in the luck index, so I do like that. They're actually not that bad, really. They're top 100 on both defense and offense, so that's not really that bad either. And you're giving me points at home in this spot. Yeah, I'm going to take it. I think Ken Palm's number on this is right around the 5 as well, so take the 5, even 4.5. I don't hate it. Charles, what's up, man? Thanks for hanging out. Let's keep going, man. We got a lot to get through here. Syracuse at Virginia Tech. I do lean to Syracuse here. Virginia Tech just had a close game against Louisville, man. This is a big game for Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech knows they're not going anywhere this year, so they really stepped it up in this game, and they kind of overperformed, shooting 42.3% from three-point range to come close to Louisville here, and they had a horrific turnover game still with 22 turnovers, and the game was still close because the three-point game was keeping them in it. They made a big second-half comeback in this game, actually kind of twice, to stay in the game, and they were within 1 point of Louisville late in the game. So coming off a game like that, I don't want anything to do with Virginia Tech. I would look to Syracuse in this game or pass the game. They do also have UNC in their final home game up next. That's Virginia Tech, and then Clemson to finish the season. So looks like a spot where, yeah, it would be Syracuse plus the points or pass in this game for me. Not a play for me, but that is the way that I look. Syracuse just ended a loss streak of theirs with the win over NC State, so they might be able to carry some momentum into this game, although they do have SMU up next and then their final home game against Virginia. But again, I like Syracuse in this one. The cash percentage is actually on Virginia Tech for 70% of the cash and only 56% of the tickets on the Virginia Tech -4. I don't agree with where the cash percentage is there. I like Syracuse in that one. It will be a pass for me, though. Let's see. I mean, UConn is at Providence. I don't know if there's a whole lot to say about this game, but UConn, they did just beat Georgetown to get back on track. And after this Providence game, which I believe they already beat Providence. Yeah, they did, but they only beat them by 3 at home. Still, technically, it is revenge for Providence. And after this, UConn's got Marquette, and then they got Senior Day against Seton Hall. So they may look past Providence a little bit in this game. Providence, I mean, they know they're not going anywhere this year either. So to have, a home game against UConn, I mean, that's the biggest game left on their schedule. And they're coming off a 30-point loss to Marquette. So that's pretty embarrassing, even though Marquette's a pretty decent team. But I would lean to Providence in this game for all those reasons. UConn up from 5 to 7 with juice, though. So I don't know if there are some injuries going on because they are public, because of course they are. 75% of tickets and only 55% of the cash, though. So the cash percentage does look like it's in agreement with me on taking the points with Providence. And at the very least, you get extra value if you want to try to grab the points with Providence. And both of these teams play really slow. So that's another advantage you have here, where if it's a slow-paced game, it'll be low scoring, most likely. So that makes it easier for a home team to cover as an underdog like that. Butler is at Villanova. Butler's coming off a close game against St. John's, man. Butler went all out in this game. It was a home game. They had St. John's in their house, and they were close at the end of this game, man. Butler was within like 1 score in the final few minutes of the game. Big game for Butler, and they fell just short, and now they have to go to Villanova, out to Philadelphia. And Villanova just barely got by Seton Hall, but if you remember, I played Seton Hall in that game, plus the points, because Villanova was coming up that huge couple of games against UConn and then beating Marquette. So I did not like the spot for Villanova going to Seton Hall. They kind of escaped there with the win, but now this is their Senior Day. This is their final home game against a Butler team that I don't think is in a very good spot. So I like Villanova in this one, although Villanova did already win on the road against Butler, though, so it is road revenge for Butler in this game, so there is that. Villanova, you're laying a lot of points, though, with Villanova, and Villanova, they play a slow-paced game, so laying points is a little bit more of an ask with Villanova. They're up from 6.5 to 7 with juice, 66% of tickets and only 50% of the cash. So I don't agree with the cash percentage on that. I agree with the line move on that. To me, it would be leaning Villanova or pass in that game. I'm passing. 1 p.m., big game on ABC, man. The first really big game of the day. A lot of big games in the SEC today, and that's Auburn at Kentucky, number 1 and number 17. Still kind of think Kentucky's a little bit overrated, man. I mean, Auburn, at the very least, you could say you're getting the better defense in this game. Kentucky, they could score. Both of these teams are really good offensively. Kentucky, you got to look and see if their guys are coming back, man. Like Lamont Butler, I think actually maybe did come back in this game against Oklahoma. I forget. Let me see. Did he? Yes, he did. So they got Butler back. I believe they're still without one of their other starters, but Butler is the more important piece for Kentucky. So Kentucky is getting healthy at the right time. One other thing about this is that you'll have to check me on the stat, but I believe the stat that I heard is that Auburn has only won straight up at Kentucky at Rupp Arena one time in the last 40 years. That seems insane to me. I don't see how that could really be the case. And we know Kentucky is almost always the better program over Auburn, but you would have to think that Auburn would have gotten at least more than one win at this arena in the last 40 years or so. But that's what I heard, that it's only one win. So Kentucky has dominated the series on their home floor. So they have the history behind them. Looking at the market, Auburn's up from 4.5 to 5 with juice. 73% of tickets, 68% of the cash. So the line has moved on Auburn a bit, but they're public and they have less of the cash on them. Oh, man, I don't know which way I would even want to go in this game, man, as far as the side. Auburn, I mean, we know they're rolling right now. They're coming off a 30-point win over Ole Miss, so they might be feeling a little bit high on themselves, right? And I believe they have not played Kentucky this year, if I'm not mistaken. So this is the only time they're playing Kentucky this year, and it's on the road. And then after this, they got Texas A&M and Alabama, and those might be actually bigger games for them just because those are higher-ranked teams. So surprisingly, this is actually maybe this is the spot that matters the least on Auburn's remaining schedule. Kentucky, obviously, it's a huge game for them with, Auburn, the number 1 team coming into their place. And Kentucky hasn't done as well in their recent games, going 2-2 over the last 4, losing at Texas. That was a bad spot, coming off getting the season sweep of Tennessee, though. They got revenge against Vandy, and then they did not do well against Alabama. But, I mean, Alabama's good, so obviously, you didn't really expect Kentucky to win that game. Then they had a second straight road game, and they went out and they actually pulled off the win at Oklahoma, which is not that easy to do. They're coming off of that game, which was kind of a weird spot for them, but it was still kind of an escape for them. And now they got Auburn, and they do only have LSU up next in their final home game. So even though that's senior day, I think this Auburn game means a lot more to Kentucky. So if you force me to lean on the side, I would slightly lean to Kentucky in this game, and I actually think that the over probably makes sense in this game as well, because you're looking at two teams that are probably going to play fast. I mean, Auburn is in the top 125 in tempo, so they play pretty fast. Kentucky plays really fast. They're going to be playing fast at home, and Auburn probably will oblige. Both of these teams are very good offensively. They're both top 6 in offensive efficiency in KenPom. Both a little bit worse defensively, even though Auburn's still really good defensively. Kentucky, not so much. It's 62nd in the country defensively. So you're looking at two really good offenses and teams that are better on offense than defense. So I would say, and probably a fast-paced game, like I said. So I would say probably you're looking at a game that's probably going to get high scoring, and the total's not that high, and it's actually down from 168 to 166. Juice to the over. Don't really see the percentages yet, but I actually think the over makes sense in that particular game, especially if you like Kentucky, it almost seems almost correlated as well, because that probably means it's going to be even a little bit of a faster game there. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to skip some of these other games. We're skipping it, baby. Arkansas and South Carolina. I'm going to talk about games that have kind of bubble implications here. Arkansas, they just beat Texas after beating Missouri. So they've had a couple of big games in a row, really 4 big games in a row, playing competitively at Texas A&M and at Auburn. Then they beat Missouri. Big game, big win for them. And then they beat Texas, unfortunately for me, because I had Texas in that game, and I believe Arkansas had a chance to win the game in regulation, and they missed a second free throw, and that's why the game went into overtime. So if Arkansas, had just won that game in regulation, my Texas bet would have hit on the plus 3.5. They would have just lost by 1 if Arkansas just made that last free throw. Very, very brutal, very irritating there. I liked the spot for Texas for a lot of reasons in that game. Now Arkansas is coming up that big win. That's a big bubble win, man. They're going to South Carolina, and after this, they got Vandy and Mississippi State. So obviously, this game is the game that matters the least on the remaining schedule. And South Carolina, I mean, they've been sneakily not bad at home. They slow the game down. They play defense. They do decently at home, even though I think they've only won one conference game. They've had some close calls at home, at least. So they haven't been a total doormat. But entire SEC really isn't that bad. So the spot isn't that great for Arkansas. I don't know that I would really want to try to play against them, though, just because Arkansas, I mean, they're still trying to get into the tournament, man. And I have them somewhat safely in right now. I have them in the round of 64 right now in my bracket. But, of course, losing this game, could really affect things, and that would really kind of hurt them. But I do still think the spot sets up better for South Carolina. I just don't quite want to do it because late in the season like this with these teams that are on the bubble, you're going to see more often than not, they're going to put in full efforts in most of these games because they basically know they can't lose at this point. As far as their tournament resume is concerned, South Carolina is coming off an embarrassing loss to Missouri by 30 points. So people are going to see that and only want to play Arkansas in this game, man. Arkansas beat Missouri, of course, although that was at home, but still, South Carolina went to Missouri and they lost by 30, but they were also coming off their first conference win, a big deal, big win over Texas, a bad game for Texas, which is another reason why I liked Texas in the game after that against Arkansas, but whatever. South Carolina, they've actually flipped from a 3.5-point dog to a pick'em, and they're actually bordering on a favorite right now. 60% of the cash on 55% of tickets on Arkansas. I mean, that is kind of a crazy line move. And it's pick the winner. It's like it almost looks just way too easy to play Arkansas in this game, man. So, again, it would be South Carolina or pass in this game. But I think if you're playing it at a pick'em, you're really kind of rolling the dice there. I mean, that line, you're not getting the best of it, obviously. You'd much rather be taking plus points with South Carolina. A home defensive underdog looks pretty decent, although I don't like the spot. But, again, Arkansas really can't afford to lose this game, so I would not want to really put my money on South Carolina and that one against Arkansas, but I would lean that way. Nephilim Death Squad, what's up, man? Is this Top again, or is it David? The Raven. Quoth the Raven. It's the best time of day. Let's keep going, man. This is Saturday, man. This is my biggest, these are my longest shows, man. College basketball Saturday, huge. Oh, and just in time for my next play here, and you're going to think that I'm insane. Like, what the fuck am I doing with this play? I'm going to play on VMI plus 9.5, the Virginia Military Institute, because, yeah, I handicap all 364, 365 Division I teams, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes I avoid, like, the real bottom of the barrel, SWAC and MEAC, although I did play one MEAC game, and I got screwed and lost on Norfolk State, but whatever. Let's not remember that game. This is a game where I don't understand the number, to be honest, in this game, because you're looking at Chattanooga being this big favorite, and they have no reason to show up in this game. So I don't understand it whatsoever. They're up from 8.5 to 9.5 here. 62% of tickets, 79% of the cash. So the money is coming in on Chattanooga, it looks like, and I don't get it. And pregame here didn't even spell Chattanooga right, so the Tennessee folks can go take it up with them and be pissed at them. But Chattanooga, they clinched the SoCon, man. They clinched the number 1 seed in the SoCon tournament. So what do they have to play for here? Nothing. They have no reason to win this game, dude. So I don't understand why you're laying almost 10 points on the road with a team that doesn't need to win the game and has really no motivation in this game. I don't get it. Not only is that a huge thing for Chattanooga to clinch the number 1 seed and the regular season SoCon title, but they did it against UNC Greensboro on the road. That's a big win, and they beat them by double digits. UNC Greensboro, one of the better teams in this conference as well. And it was a revenge spot. That was a road revenge win for Chattanooga as well. So that was a huge win for a multitude of reasons. And now It's a second straight road game for them off of that, a game that doesn't matter to them whatsoever. And for VMI, VMI already lost to Chattanooga by 25 points. So is Chattanooga, like, even if they wanted to, like, try to pay attention, like, how do you get motivated for this after you clinch the conference against one of the better teams in the conference in revenge, and now you're playing a team you already beat by 25 points, second straight road game? Are you really going to show up for this game? I don't think so. And for VMI, this is a big game for them, man. It's senior day. It's their final home game. They've lost 3 games in a row, getting just absolutely annihilated by Wofford, which is really pretty embarrassing. And then I'm not going to dock them for losing to Furman by 4 or losing to Samford by 12. I mean, those are pretty good teams. So VMI, I think they're going to be highly motivated here, man. They do not want to end the regular season on such a bad note. The last 2 times they played at home, they've lost. Just some ugly stuff. I mean, they're not a good team, obviously, but they've been at least somewhat competitive in this conference, and they know that they lost to this Chattanooga team by 25 points. So, again, I think a lot of this makes sense to play VMI here. For senior day, you get extra motivated because, again, you want to send your seniors off, with something, just a feather in their cap, basically. So you have the top team in the conference, man, at least record-wise, coming into your place on senior day, and they don't have any motivation in this game. Yeah, I'm going to play VMI in this situation, man. Chattanooga, I mean, obviously they're the better team. There's no question about that. They're not very good defensively, and they play slow, and Ken Baum has them up pretty high in luck index at 48th in luck. So he's telling you Chattanooga is maybe overperforming a little bit, and they're not good defensively, even though, yeah, they could score, but they also play slow, so it's kind of a weird mix of slow play and not good defense, but efficient offense. Doesn't really make sense. VMI actually likes to play a little bit faster, so they may actually try to go a little bit more up-tempo in this game. They don't play good defense either. And they're somewhat high in luck as well, but this is really all about the spot, man. So I don't know what else I have to say about this, but if they throw this game into a bit of a faster tempo, that might not really be what Chattanooga wants to do either. So, but really it's about the spot. Like, I just don't see how Chattanooga really gets motivated for that game. I think all the motivation in that game is on VMI, and you're getting a ton of points at home. Miami, Ohio at Ohio. This is a pretty good game, man. Miami, Ohio is still sitting above Ohio in the conference standings. I've been telling you basically just game after game with Miami, Ohio, that they're not as good as they appear to be. They're coming off almost a 30-point win over Northern Illinois. Now they're going to Ohio, and they already beat Ohio once at home. So this is going to be revenge for Ohio, and I believe Ohio to be the better of these two teams. And you wouldn't think it at all. Looking at these records, you're going to see this and think, Miami, Ohio has this way better record, both overall and in conference, and they're getting 5.5 points in this game, and they already beat Ohio once. Like, how could you not take the points here? Well, I'm telling you right now, again, Miami, Ohio is not the better of these two teams. Even though we do have a large sample size here, they've just been overperforming a bit. Ohio is better than they are. Ohio is coming off an ugly loss, too. I played Western Michigan in that game, and I got a nice outright win as an underdog with Western Michigan there because Ohio was in a sandwich spot, in my opinion. They were coming off that huge win over Akron, which was their biggest win of the season over the top team in the MAC. Huge win for them. Then they had to go on the road to face Western Michigan, who they already had crushed at home by 25 points or whatever that is. And they had this game against Miami, Ohio up next, which is a much bigger game as well. So it was a sandwich spot, and now I think this is a bounce-back spot for Ohio. I'm not playing this one, but this game would either be Ohio or you don't play the game. The money is already coming in pretty substantially on Ohio, up from 4 to 6 with juice now. If you're going to play Ohio, I would say you better do it before it hits 7, or maybe try to lay a money line on that and parlay it with another money line favorite or something to try to knock the price down. I don't like parlays personally. I know a lot of the pros are doing that now, where they find two somewhat larger favorite money lines that they think are both going to win, and they parlay them together to try to knock that price down. But again, I don't love it because whenever you do the parlay, you never get a good enough price on it, in my opinion. I would prefer to just lay more juice and play both teams straight up, or just play both teams on the spread straight. 65% of tickets, 86% of the cash coming in on Ohio. I think this line was probably in the 5.5 range when I looked at it earlier. So this line is really moving up. The money is agreeing with me on Ohio, and I agree with that. I agree with myself that Ohio is the right side in that one. Andrew, what's up, man? You've made live ones before, right? Is Tim Pool on right now? Don't go watch him. Watch me instead. That's right. Yeah. Oh yeah, Top. What's up, man? I forget if I shouted you out specifically because I asked if it was you or David. Texas Tech at Kansas. This game, everybody's going to look at this and think, what is going on with this line? This is on ESPN at 2 p.m. Eastern. Number 10, Texas Tech. They're ranked, but Kansas is actually a favorite. They're one of those unranked home favorites, man. So, again, you look at this line, the public, everybody's been shitting on Kansas, and I enjoy it because I hate Kansas. I hate Hunter Dickinson. I think he's the dirtiest player in college basketball, man. He is a dick, as I keep saying. So, I root against Kansas, man. Plus, Kansas, they just are a team that constantly wins for the most part, so it's fun when they don't win. But this game, they're up from 2.5 with juice to 4.5 with juice. They got 55% of the tickets, but 63% of the cash now coming in on Texas Tech. And I think maybe what we're seeing is that I think some of the numbers guys are just seeing this line and thinking this line has gone way too far now, and they're starting to come back and play Texas Tech. I don't know, man, because usually when I see a line like that and it looks way too easy to take, the ranked team getting points, like usually you see the public on that team that's getting points, and you usually want to fade that sentiment, but the market doesn't really look that way in this game. I think the line is a bit too high. I'm just going to pass the game. I don't want really to have anything to do with this game, but Texas Tech, they are coming off that big game against Houston, though, so that would lead me to believe that they are somewhat in a hangover spot here. I mean, that was a big game against Houston. Houston got revenge against them, but huge game with Houston coming into their place. And Texas Tech played them pretty close. I mean, it was a battle. It's always like a physical battle, especially between Texas Tech and Houston. It's going to be a game like that. Both of those teams play defense. They play fairly slow. Kansas coming off a pretty easy win, really, going to Colorado. Although, I thought it was a bad spot for them going to Colorado, but they were able to get the win against a bad team, I should say. Now they're coming back home and they get Texas Tech. I do think the spot does set up better for Kansas, so I probably would still slightly lean that way, but I don't want to lay that number. As you look, even in KenPom, he's got Texas Tech, I think, ranked in the top 10, so there's no way that he would tell you that this number should be 4.5. He's got Kansas at 20th, Texas Tech at 7th, so I'm pretty sure that he has Kansas only winning this game by about 2 points, so really what I would do is I would prefer to play this game under if I was going to play this game. You got two teams that are top 30 defensively, and even though Kansas, it looks like they like to play a bit faster, they usually play faster than they do this year, man. So Texas Tech likes to slow it way, way down, and they may be able to start slowing this game down a little bit, and maybe Kansas will even just agree to play that way. But Kansas is also 5th in the country in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. So I think this game probably makes sense as far as an under is concerned. Total down from 144.5 to 144. We see 67% of tickets, 69% of the cash on the over, but a slight move downward. Again, I think you may see this game wind up being a lower scoring, more ugly game. And again, that wouldn't really be conducive to laying points there. But if Kansas is able to speed it up, that should help Kansas as well. So the under would actually probably be correlated with Texas Tech to some extent in that game. Whew, I can't breathe, man. I'm like George Floyd here. I keep talking, and it's like I got Derek Chauvin's knee on my neck here, man. All right. Again, I don't want to talk about every one of these games, but again, I got to talk about games with bubble implications. So Nebraska, I have them in Dayton right now. I have them in the first 4, so I have them in the last 4 teams in. They just suffered just a ridiculously ugly, low-scoring loss to Michigan where neither team even got out of the 40s. Horrific. Just horrific shooting from both teams in that game. Nebraska's not going anywhere, though, and they're staying at home to face Minnesota, who's not a very good team. Nebraska is the better of these two teams. They are at home. I mean, they are the better team. Yeah, I know they're coming off a tough game, though, but when you're Nebraska, you can't afford losses like this, man. So I don't think hangover spot really happens when you come down the stretch like this. Even if you're coming off a big game, you need to win games to get into the tournament. Nebraska really, really does. So I think Nebraska has to show up in this game. Minnesota coming off a couple ugly losses too, though. Pretty ugly one against Northwestern, really, with Northwestern down a couple of their best players. Minnesota does have Wisconsin up next, but I don't think they're really going to overlook Nebraska either. So I kind of think both teams are going to show up here. So I don't want to lay whatever the huge amount of points is with Nebraska here, although I don't know if I would lean that way. The market is kind of indicating that way with Nebraska up from 5 to 7.5. 63% of tickets, 85% of the cash. The line looks a little bit high to me, but Nebraska, for the most part, they do have a fairly strong home court advantage, although they didn't get it done in the last game at home. But they do tend to beat worse teams at home at the very least. They had one bad stretch on their home floor in the middle of conference play here, but they've kind of righted the ship. I think they played well against Michigan still, even though they couldn't score. I mean, they at least played well defensively in that game. But they need wins, man, because they're trying to get into the tournament at all. So they can't afford a loss here. So that probably would have me leaning slightly to Nebraska. Bryant is at Maine. Pretty big game, man, in the American East between two of the top three teams in the American East, which I think these teams are. At this point, UMass Lowell is really starting to falter, but Bryant is now facing a third straight road game after losing a close game to Vermont and then going to UMass Lowell and beating them by 1 on the road. So 2 big road games. The UMass Lowell still one of the better teams in this conference, even though they've been sliding and falling apart. And now Bryant has to go to Maine, who they already beaten. Not only did they beat them, but they embarrassed them, man, at Bryant by 26 points. So in this game, I would look towards the Maine side or not play the game. I mean, I'm not playing it, but Bryant does have their home senior day game up next against UNH as well, but UNH sucks. So I don't know if that's really going to draw much of their focus, but this Maine game, it's a tough spot, man, for all those reasons that I just said. Maine, they're coming off, what are they coming off of? A win over UNH, which kind of righted the ship because they had lost 3 games in a row, losing to a couple of bad teams. They're both on the road, though, and they actually righted the ship in a third straight road game. Now they're coming back home. This is a big home game for them against Bryant, man. So, again, it would be Maine would be the side I would lean to in this game, even though maybe I'm a little bit biased because I kind of like Maine this year. Bryant up from 1.5 to 2. I don't agree with that move. I would take the points with Maine or not play the game. Maine, again, might have extra motivation as well just because they got totally embarrassed by Bryant earlier in the season. Let's see. Oklahoma at Ole Miss. I mean, Oklahoma, I have them in the first 4. So this is a game with tournament implications as well. Oklahoma's coming off a slew of big games, though, especially these last 2. They beat Mississippi State, where I was on Oklahoma in that game. And that was the teeth-smashing game with, what's his name, Duke Miles, I think. Just Oklahoma, they're all going all out. And he dove onto the court and shattered his teeth on the court. Just crazy stuff. Huge effort for Oklahoma in that game. And they turned around and had another big effort against Kentucky. Almost beat Kentucky. Now they got to go on the road to Ole Miss. And then they got their senior day up next against Missouri. And they finished the season on the road against Texas. So not an easy schedule here. I don't believe they play Ole Miss. Yeah, I don't think they played them otherwise. This is their only game against Ole Miss. They got to go on the road to do it. And this is an unfamiliar environment, man, because remember, Oklahoma is new to the SEC, so they're not used to playing in these road SEC venues. So that makes it a little bit more difficult in this road spot. This is a difficult spot, man. So there are a lot of things that I look at that would have me fading Oklahoma in this game, but I'm not going to play the game at all. Ole Miss, I mean, they look like a play-on team here as they just lost to Auburn. Even though that was a big game, they lost by 30 points, man. You lose by 30 points to anybody, and especially now they're coming back home off 2 straight road losses, and they're on a 3-game skid. And the last time they played at home, they lost to their rival, Mississippi State, in revenge and couldn't get it done. So I think they are going to show up in this game, even though they do have Tennessee and Florida up next. I think they have a lot of reasons to be motivated here. It looks like a bounce-back spot for Ole Miss. If this was in the middle of the season, I would be on Ole Miss in this game probably. The problem is, again, Oklahoma is one of those teams that's really fighting to get into the tournament right now. Ole Miss is more secure in their tournament bid right now. So that's the one issue I have with this, or I don't quite want to do it, because otherwise I would be probably laying the points with Ole Miss here. They're down from 8.5 to 7.5, 74% of tickets, 75% of the cash on them. Line has gone down. We do see a little bit more of the cash on them, although they are public. Again, it's a tough game to figure out, man. The games that I'm actually playing are games where I really don't see, much of, any factor kind of going against my play, which of course, now that I'm saying that, some of these games that I have leans are probably going to wind up being right, and I'm probably going to lose some of my bets, so that's going to suck. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but maybe it won't. I've been hot, baby. I've been hot. Ball State at Bowling Green. This game drew my interest a little bit because Ball State, they just played a close game against Akron, man, only losing by 5, although I think they were losing by more than that, and they kind of made it look a little bit closer than maybe it was at the end, but they were within 5 points with a few minutes left, so they did make it close. Big game. Now they go out on the road to face Bowling Green, who they already beat at home, and they beat them bad by 21 points, so not a good spot for Ball State. It will be revenge for Bowling Green. Ball State's got Central Michigan up, which is going to be their final home game, senior night for Ball State coming up there, so the spot's not good for Ball State. Bowling Green, I believe, just broke a loss streak, if I'm not mistaken. No, they won 2 games in a row, actually, my mistake. Beating Eastern Michigan on the road, actually, after beating Toledo on the road. Should have been kind of a bad spot for Bowling Green, and they still won the game, which is kind of crazy. Probably as an underdog, too. Now they're coming back home. They did lose their last home game, but it was a tough game against Kent State, who is a good team. They lost the prior home game to Ohio, who was also a good team. So this Bowling Green team actually hasn't been that bad at home. Really, on most of their home losses, they lost at home to Akron as well. They've had a lot of tough home games, so they haven't been that bad at home. So I would look to Bowling Green in this game. I'm not playing it, but that's the way I'm leaning this one. Bowling Green up from 1.5 to 2. They got 71% of tickets on them, but 69% of the cash is coming in on Ball State. So I don't understand that cash percentage discrepancy there. I agree with that slight line move on the Bowling Green side in that one. Jacksonville State, I think, is not in a good spot in the Conference USA. The problem that I have is that, when you're looking at a bad spot this late in the season, sometimes you got to be, you got to be a little bit wary of it because Jacksonville State's still trying to fight kind of for seeding here. Like, I don't know if it matters that much, but winning, the conference regular season does kind of matter, and they're right in the thick of it there against the CUSA. But they are coming off that big game against Liberty. Close, low-scoring, ugly game. They lost to Liberty. Now they're going to go down to Florida and face Florida International. Second straight road game. They did already beat FIU at home, although they only beat them by 4, 6.5-point favorites. So FIU actually covered that game. But it looks like kind of a sandwich spot, though, for Jacksonville State. And they got Kennesaw to finish the season, who's a little bit better than these other teams as well. That's a revenge game for Jacksonville State, as they already lost to Kennesaw by double digits at Kennesaw, and that is senior day for Jacksonville State. So there are reasons why they might overlook Florida International here. And I believe for FIU, this is their final home game. It is. They only have road games up next, so it's senior day for them. So there are more reasons to look to the FIU side in this one. Jacksonville State actually down from 4.5 to 3, so some pretty significant line movement. Agreeing with me on FIU in this game. 75% of tickets, only 53% of the cash on the Jacksonville State side. I agree with all that. I would look to FIU in this game. Pretty bad team, though. So, and Jacksonville State, if they are still trying to play to make sure that their record is good enough, they might still show up in that game, but I would still lean to the Florida International side. I just don't think it's quite strong enough to be a play for me. Let's keep going. Let's see. Wright State, I played on them the other night, and this is a spot where I don't like the spot for them now, is they beat Cleveland State. That was a big win for Wright State. They're kind of just in the middle of the pack here, and I actually don't even think they can advance now. They only have one game left here in conference play, and they're 2 games back of they're 2 games back of the next teams up above them, Oakland, and this IU PUI team, IU Indianapolis, now is 3 games behind them. So Wright State is basically locked into their seeding in the Horizon tournament, and they're coming off a big win over Cleveland State, who was one of the teams with the best records in the conference, not the best team. I think, they're not as good as their record looks, but still, that was a big win. That was senior night for Wright State. I got the win on Wright State. That was one of my bets that night. Coming off of that, not a good spot for them, and they already beat IU Indianapolis by 18 points at home. So for all those reasons, doesn't look like it's much of a motivational spot to me for Wright State. So I like IU PUI in this one. It is their senior day, of course, and they are coming off kind of an ugly loss at home against Robert Morris. So basically, everything kind of lines up on IUPUI in this one. This has not been a play for me, though, but I don't really see that much of a reason to not do it other than Wright State is up from 3.5 to 4, but we do see the money cash percentage coming in on IUPUI. 67% of tickets, 91% of the cash coming in on IUPUI. I probably won't add it to my card, but that's close. I do like that one. I would take the points with IUPUI in that one. I keep calling them IUPUI because I'm so used to IU Indianapolis. Let's keep going. LSU, they're coming off a game where I played them in their last game, and they played Tennessee really close. They had a big game there. Now they're got to go out on the road to face Mississippi State. Doesn't really look like a great spot necessarily, even though debatably they should be focused playing a ranked team like this. But they got Kentucky, and then they got Senior Day against Texas A&M up to finish the season, man. And LSU knows they're not really going anywhere, so this is the least meaningful game left on their schedule at the very least. Mississippi State kind of in bounce back mode, really, because they just got annihilated by Alabama. And I was on Mississippi State in that game. I thought that was a good bounce back spot for them. And holy crap, they got just absolutely smoked, losing by 38 points. Totally embarrassing. Now they're coming back home. And yes, even though they have bigger games up next, this does look like a spot where Mississippi State would be the correct side. They're probably laying a ton of points, though. They're laying 11.5, sitting at the 11.5 spread here. 62% of tickets, 93% of the cash coming into Mississippi State. So the cash percentage agrees with me on that one. I agree. I would lay the points at Mississippi State if I was going to play that game. This one has not made my card either, but it's close. LSU, this game, though, against Tennessee, they were losing by more than what you would think. They were losing by double digits in the final 2 minutes, so it wasn't like they took them right to the wire. I mean, they scored right near the end to kind of make it look more cosmetic, more competitive than maybe it actually was down the stretch. And they covered for me because they were a 10.5 point underdog. So that's kind of the one reason why I don't quite want to do it, but lean to laying the points with Mississippi State there. Probably the biggest game of the day, at least rankings-wise, but maybe just overall. This is a classic style of matchup, too, with number 6 Alabama, number 5 Tennessee. This is a game where you're looking at the offensive team in Alabama. You got offense plus fast pace. That's Alabama. And you got defense plus slow pace in Tennessee. And Alabama's defense, not as good, and Tennessee's offense, not as good. So do you like offense or do you like defense? Well, you know me. If both teams are going to show up in the game, I tend to lean towards the defense more often than not because the public tends to like the offense. They like the flashy team. They like the team that can score, man. They don't like ugly offenses like Tennessee. But in a spot like this, I would probably have to lean to the Tennessee side. And as far as the total is concerned, the total's probably correlated because it's, a slow-down defensive team in Tennessee up against a fast scoring team like Alabama. So if you like Alabama, then probably you like the over to go along with it. If you like Tennessee, then you probably like the under to go along with it because whichever team controls the pace is probably going to win out as far as this battle is concerned. I think that's going to be Tennessee because they are at home. So the home team usually has the easier time controlling the pace, and it's easier to slow it down than to speed it up because you can just hold on to the ball when you have possession of it. So that you could do what you want, basically, slow the game down that way. So I do think Tennessee may be able to do that here. That's the way I would lean in this one. Tennessee's actually up from 2 to 4 as a favorite. It was 3.5 last I looked. There might still be 3.5s out there if you do like Tennessee. 70% of tickets, 78% of the cash coming in on Alabama. But I agree with the line move on this one. I agree with the Tennessee side here. Alabama is coming off smoking Mississippi State, as I said, and beating Kentucky the game before that. A couple of big games there. They do have Florida and Auburn up next to finish the season. I'm not going to say they're going to overlook Tennessee, but I mean, it's just hilarious that they have the number 3 and number 1 ranked teams coming up after the number 5. This is the SEC, man. What do you want? This is Alabama's only game of the season against Tennessee. So I don't know how you're going to be affected by having to go and playing a real slow-down team on the road, which I don't think they've really done that this year, really, except I guess maybe Texas A&M, maybe arguably, although Alabama was actually able to speed that game up. But Texas A&M is not as good as Tennessee, man. Tennessee may be able to get this game slowed down. Tennessee, they're coming off beating LSU in that close game, like I mentioned, second straight road game. I played LSU because I thought it was a sandwich spot. Tennessee was coming off the big win on the road over Texas A&M, and they had Alabama up next, so I thought it was a bad spot. They got the job done, didn't do it pretty, and now I think they may be in the better spot here from that, too, because that game just wasn't a great game for them. Now they're coming back home. The last game at home they had wasn't that great either, as they almost lost to Vandy, which was a sandwich spot for Tennessee as well. And I believe it was revenge. No, it wasn't revenge. It was revenge for Tennessee, actually. But Vandy, they always step it up because they're the little brother in the state of Tennessee. And Tennessee was coming off that game against Kentucky and had Texas A&M up next, so it might not have been the greatest spot there. So Vandy did get the job done as far as covering the spread there. And, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but that was Tennessee's last home game, which may be a little bit of a misleading result, but they didn't play well in that game, so they may want to bounce back and have a better game at home for that reason as well. And Tennessee might play with a little bit of an extra chip on their shoulder because they're ranked higher than Alabama is right now, I believe, but Alabama is the 1 seed right now, I guess just based on like resume or whatever in the bracketologies, including mine. I have Alabama on the 1 line right now, and Tennessee is sitting on the 2 line, so Tennessee might have a little bit of an extra chip on their shoulder for that reason, thinking they're more deserving of the 1 seed. So I lean to Tennessee in that one, which I guess also by default would mean I lean to the under, but I'm not going to play that. Loyola Chicago St. Louis is a good one on CBS Sports, 4 p.m. Eastern. Got to try to get this done, man. I want to try to get this done in the next hour. Get this done before noon to get this video up and whatever. But I got your noon play already out there, the Penn State play. So VMI might be noon as well. I forget. St. Louis, they've kind of righted the ship with a couple of nice wins over Rhode Island and Davidson. Not wins that are going to like hang them over, but now they kind of have a quick revenge game here against Loyola Chicago as they lost to Loyola Chicago by 9 not that long ago. So I kind of like St. Louis in this game because they get Loyola at home now. Loyola Chicago's been really, really rolling, so you're going to have to step in front of a train here that's won 5 games in a row, including beating the St. Louis team and beating Dayton. Those are pretty big wins. George Washington I put a little bit less stock into, but now Loyola Chicago's got to go out on the road to face St. Louis, which I actually think this is a venue maybe they're not totally familiar with because these teams have kind of realigned conferences recently, so I don't know. I don't know how familiar they are with this venue, although I think maybe both teams came over from the Missouri Valley at some point. You have to check me on that. So maybe it's kind of an old school matchup. So maybe Loyola's program is used to playing at St. Louis, but maybe they haven't done it for a while. I don't know. You'll have to check me on that. But Loyola, yeah, I mean, just because it's quick revenge, basically, and Loyola does have their final home game up next. I don't know that Loyola Chicago is going to really care about their like seeding. Maybe they will because they actually have the potential to fall down behind 3 teams here if they don't do something towards the end of the season. But they have a few games left, so maybe they don't care as much. I think St. Louis cares about this game more. I like St. Louis in this one. They're down from 3-3 with reduced juice here, but 92% of the cash on them, 53% of the tickets on Loyola Chicago. So it looks like kind of a pros versus Joes scenario. The public's going to come in. Oh, Loyola Chicago already beat St. Louis. Now they're getting points. Give me the points. Better team, the team with the better record. I don't agree with it. I like St. Louis in the quick turnaround revenge spot there. Nate, what's up, man? Bruno, like Bruno Mars or Bruno, the Sacha Baron Cohen character. Still don't like what he did to our man Ron Paul in that movie, by the way, although it was kind of a funny movie overall. But Utah State, Colorado State on Fox Sports 1, big game in the Mountain West. Utah State already beat Colorado State at home by 8 points. Now Utah State coming off kind of an ugly loss, though, at Boise, and that was a good spot for Boise and not a very good spot for Utah State. Coming off a big win over San Diego State, kind of a letdown spot there. Boise trying to play their way into the tournament, man. They're getting close to being a tournament consideration here. I believe I have them in my next 4 out right now, so I have them about 5 or 6 teams away from being in the tournament right now. Boise playing well to finish the season right now as far as that's going for sure, but Utah State now kind of an ugly loss, so I don't know if I would want to fade Utah State here, even though it's a second straight road game. They do have their final home game up next. They did already beat Colorado State, but I don't know. But this will be a big game for Colorado State as well. I kind of think both teams have reason to show up in this game. Colorado State, of course, they're coming off some easier opponents here, so they'll probably actually be the somewhat more rested team coming into this game, even though they did have to travel a little bit. Coming back home here, it's Utah State coming into their place, and it is revenge for Colorado State. So all that being said, I would lean to the Colorado State side. It does look like Colorado State's kind of an anti-public home now favorite here, up from Pick'em to 2. So the money looks like it is coming in, agreeing with me on that side. 63% of tickets, only 55% of the cash on Utah State. So Utah State's kind of a public road underdog here now. And you know me, you don't want to, I always say you don't want to look to the side of those public road underdogs, man. So it would be Colorado State in that game. That would be my lean for me. Related to Tony Bruno? No, I'm not. Although my name, I guess I would say my Italian family name isn't really that far off from that name. USC at Oregon, this is a play for me, man. We're getting into some of my other plays. I'm only giving you 2 of the 9 so far. It feels like this is taking forever, but I got a lot of later games. USC plus 7.5 is going to be a play for me in this one. I'm going to fade Oregon. I think this is a good spot to do it. Oregon, they're looking like a public favorite here with the market does look in agreement with USC. It looks to me indicating on USC. Oregon down from 9 to now 7 with juice. I think there are 7.5s out there. Of course, as I always say, 7 is kind of a key number in basketball just because it's that 3-possession threshold where the underdog stops intentionally fouling. 83% of tickets, only 68% of the cash on Oregon, so they are public. They have less of the cash on them. The line has moved down a little bit, so kind of all the market indicators that you're looking for are indicating on the USC side. USC, yeah, they're coming off kind of a big game against Ohio State, but they just have not been able to get a win for a while, man, losing 4 straight games. Now they're going out on the road, but that may actually be a good thing because Oregon is actually a venue that they're used to playing in at the very least because both of these teams used to be in the Pac-12, of course, so it's not an unfamiliar venue for this USC team, so I think that kind of mitigates the home court advantage for Oregon here. So I kind of like the spot better for USC, man. I think they're going to want to show up for this game against Oregon. They did already lose to Oregon at home. I believe this was at home. It could have been a neutral site. No, it was a neutral site, excuse me. Or no, it was at home. What am I saying? It was in L.A. Was this a neutral site, though? It says it was in L.A. I forget if USC is actually in L.A. or not. But either way, it was, at the very least, it was a semi-home. It is revenge, in-season revenge for USC. So a little bit of an extra motivator for that reason. The revenge angle coming into play there for USC. Let's see. What else was I going to say about this? Oh, yeah, and Oregon is in a letdown spot. They just beat Wisconsin, man. They've gotten back on track, won 4 games in a row, but beating Northwestern and Rutgers at home doesn't impress me that much with those teams having to go out to the Pacific Coast. And then beating Iowa. I mean, Iowa's just been really, really kind of in free fall, essentially. So I don't put much stock into that either. But then a second straight road game, beating Wisconsin, that is a big win for Oregon, man. Huge win against a ranked team. And they were getting blown out in this game. So not only did they win, but it was on the road. They had to mount a huge comeback as they were down almost 20 points later in this game. They were down in the final 10 minutes. They were down more than double digits. Came all the way back, sent it into overtime, and won the game. Absolutely ridiculous. Wisconsin didn't have a great shooting game in that game, and they were horrible turnover-wise, losing the turnover battle 17-8. So that definitely skewed the game. You don't see that a lot with home teams, losing a turnover battle like that. And Wisconsin, 25% from 3 is not really like them either. They're a very efficient, very good shooting offense usually, and that is not what you usually see out of Wisconsin. So a little bit of kind of an outlier situation there. And that game, for most of that game, it was not looking like it was an Oregon win by any means. Huge game for them. Now they got USC, which I really am not sure they're going to totally pay attention to this USC team. And I mean, Oregon, they're not in danger of falling out of the tournament field or anything like that. I have them, I think, on the 6 or 7 line right now. And they do have Indiana up next, and that is a bigger game just, as far as we're now in the Big Ten. Indiana's one of the huge names in the Big Ten. And not only that, but that's Oregon's final home game. So that's senior day for them up in a few days. So I think this is a bad spot all around for Oregon. I like USC for all of those reasons. Give me USC in that game. And I think Oregon they've just been overranked all year, man. They're 26th in Ken Baum's luck index, which isn't great. USC, of course, is the worst team, but they're not that bad. He has them way down in luck index at 301st. So he's telling you USC is not as bad as they look. They're also sitting at 500, which is a little bit of a motivator as well, because you just don't want your record to fall below 500, really, man. It just doesn't look good. USC, at least, is a top 40 offensive team, according to Ken Baum, at 39th. So they can at least actually kind of match Oregon as far as the offense is concerned. Yes, Oregon is the better defense, but you're laying points with Oregon, man, in a bad spot if you are on the Oregon side. So, again, I would prefer USC here. And Oregon, both teams, there's not really a huge tempo difference here. Oregon plays slightly slower, but I don't think that's really going to matter that much. There's not a huge variance in the tempo as far as those two teams are concerned. So being on the road for that reason isn't going to affect USC as much either. So I like that. Next up, I got to play in the in the Northeast Conference, man. Oh, help me. I'm going to be on Fairleigh Dickinson money line at minus 115 instead of laying the 1 point or whatever. You know me. I've talked about this. When you have a team that's either laying 1.5, or 2, it's actually more advantageous in college basketball to lay the money line. So that's what I'm doing. The money line's almost at a pick'em price. Fairleigh Dickinson's down from minus 1.5 with juice to 1. So some movement against them. I don't agree with that movement, and that's because Long Island, their opponent here, Long Island has nothing to gain by winning this game, dude. I mean, except that, yes, their overall record would fall to below 500, but is that enough of a motivator? Even though, yeah, I just said it's a little bit of a motivator for USC, that's not something you want to look at solely, obviously. I just think it's maybe a little bit of an extra motivator for USC. And for Long Island, I don't think it's enough, man, because you look at this NEC layout here, these teams, the way that the way the standings are laid out here at this point, Long Island, all these teams have one game left. Long Island is locked into the 2 seed in the tournament, man. Central Connecticut's locked into the 1. Long Island is locked into the 2. So they're already probably looking ahead to the conference tournament now, man. So that's it makes it kind of a sandwich spot for that reason, too. Just like I was talking about with Chattanooga, you come off that big win, you are locked into your conference seeding, and it becomes a sandwich spot, actually, because even though you don't even know who your opponent is next, you're still looking forward to that first conference tournament game, man. So it makes it a sandwich spot. Long Island, I think, is in a very similar situation. They have won 5 games in a row, including beating this Fairleigh Dickinson team not that long ago by 4 at home. So it's a quick revenge spot for Fairleigh Dickinson. And Long Island did actually cover in this game, so it wasn't like, oh, they were a huge favorite and Fairleigh Dickinson played them close. No, not really. Long Island just kind of, even though they started out bad in the game, they were winning most of the rest of the game. But looking at this game, Fairleigh Dickinson did have a pretty bad shooting game. 26.3 from 3-point range isn't very good. So that is one thing. It was a little bit of an outlier in that game, but still, it's going to be a quick revenge spot for Fairleigh Dickinson. Long Island, again, they just beat Wagner, and Wagner's been one of the better teams in this conference recently. I believe Wagner got into the tournament last year out of this conference, maybe 2 years in a row. I forget. Or no, Fairleigh Dickinson was in it 2 years ago. Wagner was in it last year. So that was a big game for Long Island. Although Fairleigh Dickinson, of course, as I just said, got into the tournament 2 years ago as well. But Long Island did already beat them, although they have already beaten Wagner too. And they actually beat them by the same score in both games. But still, that game, I think it's all just big because they clinched the 2 seed in the NEC. They cannot move up or down at this point. They're locked in. And now all they have left is this road game against a team they already beat. Whereas for Fairleigh Dickinson, they had lost 3 games in a row, including that loss to Long Island, which started that loss streak for them. I mean, so Fairleigh Dickinson's going to remember that, man. That game sent them kind of spiraling. 3 straight losses on the road, but at home they have definitely been better at the very least, and they bounced back at home as well when they came back home, beating Stonehill, and now this is their senior night, man, senior day. So they got the number 2 team in the conference coming into their place. Yeah, I think they're going to want to show up, and Fairleigh Dickinson is still kind of playing for seeding a little bit here. They're kind of in this mix here. I don't know if they care that much, but I think they care about revenge and senior night, whereas Long Island, I don't really think has much of any reason to show up in this game. So I like Fairleigh Dickinson in that game for those reasons. But then if you look at Ken Baum, where's Long Island? He has them as LIU. They're almost in the bottom, like 60 in the country. He's got them fairly lucky, 157th in luck, very slow, 303rd. Very good defense, or decent defensively, especially for one of these teams. Almost in the top 100 in defense, 138th. Terrible offensively, 355th. So they're like a bottom 10 offensive team. Whereas Fairleigh Dickinson, you're getting the slightly better offense, not by much, but you are also getting, well, you're getting the worst defense, but you're getting a faster-paced team, so there's going to be a huge pacing collision here. So Fairleigh Dickinson, if they're able to speed this game up, Long Island does not want to do that. Long Island plays significantly slow, like bottom 60th in tempo, whereas Fairleigh Dickinson is almost top 70 in tempo. So if Fairleigh Dickinson is able to speed this up at home, that's going to help them as well. Yes, they are the worst defense, but they are actually the better offense slightly, which is strange to say, having that bad of an offense, but that's just how bad Long Island's offensive efficiency has been. And then in the luck index, you got Long Island way up high in the luck index, and you got Fairleigh Dickinson way low at 326. So Ken Baum is telling you Fairleigh Dickinson maybe a little bit better than this really ugly record would indicate. And for Long Island, maybe they're not as good as their record would indicate. And I think the public might just see this and think, well, how am I getting points with Long Island? You know, a team with a better record here. It's basically just pick the winner. Public's not going to really look at this game, but if they did, I mean, the line does look a little bit misleading. But I actually think that maybe the line should be even a little bit higher because I just don't think it's taken into account that Long Island, really, I don't see any reason why they don't have much of a reason to show up in this game other than the fact that, yeah, you don't lose a game intentionally. You show up and you do want to try to win the game. You don't want to actually lose, but I just think the motivation just isn't totally there. You know what I mean? That's, you know, it's the way that I look at these games. So let's keep going here. IPFW, Cleveland State in the Horizon on ESPN2. Cleveland State, they're coming off that loss to Wright State. Like I said, they've lost 4 of the last 5 games. They're kind of starting to spiral, but 2 of those were at home, or 2 of those were on the road, Now they're coming back home, and they did lose their last 2 home games as well. So this is their final home game, senior night. They may actually bounce back from this, even though it is road revenge for IPFW here. The road revenge, I think, might really kind of get negated by the spot in this game. IPFW, though, they're coming off a loss as well against Northern Kentucky, and it is road revenge for them. So kind of you're looking at a situation where probably both teams are going to show up in this game, and then it's kind of like, well, which way do you want to look? Because then you kind of want to look to the team that's the better team, which I think is IPFW. As the odds makers are telling you, Cleveland State doesn't have the full home court advantage built into the line here. They're up from 2.5 to 2.5 with juice, though, and it looks like IPFW is getting some of the public tickets somehow. 58% of tickets, only 57% of the cash. So the market read does kind of look like it's on Cleveland State. Both teams do look like they're going to show up focused. I don't know what I would do with this game, to be honest. So I'll pass. And then Towson is hosting Hampton. And this is a situation where Towson, this is their last game. And I believe in the Colonial here, I believe they're locked into the 1 seed, I believe, in the Colonial tournament now. So Towson doesn't have a whole lot to play for here, except that it is senior day for them. So I don't know that I would really want to come in and fade Towson there. I just thought I would kind of point that out. Hampton, you know, this is their final conference game as well, on the road, coming off a road loss. May, you know, try to show up in this game as they're facing the team that's atop the conference. Towson down from 7 to 7 with reduced juice. They do have 64% of the cash on them, but 55% of the tickets on Hampton. So it looks like the cash percentage is on Towson, but Towson, if they really don't have that much to play for, man, because they're locked into the 1 seed, I don't know if I would want to do much with that game. Sanford and UNC Greensboro, man, there were so many games. So this is on ESPN News, baby. They're not just on ESPN Plus. ESPN News is going to televise this one. And this is a big game in the SoCon because this is for the number 2 seed, basically. Is probably going to wind up being one of these 2 teams. Whichever team wins this game, basically. Greensboro, as I said, coming off that loss to Chattanooga. That's a big game, but they lost it by double digits at home, and now it's senior day against Sanford. Sanford, power ratings-wise, is still the best team in this conference. And they've kind of turned it around, winning their last 2 games against some bad teams, though. But now it's a second straight road game facing UNC Greensboro, and they already beat UNC Greensboro at home by 7. So I think it actually sets up a little bit better for UNC Greensboro. And they might be gunning for Sanford a little bit more just because this is this Sanford team not only beat them this year, but Sanford won the conference tournament last year. Sanford did not beat, I was just checking to make sure. Sanford did not beat UNC Greensboro during the conference tournament last year, though. So it isn't like a double revenge spot for that reason, a big elimination revenge. So still maybe a slight lean, though, to UNC Greensboro on that one, excuse me. I'm losing my train of thought here. UNC Greensboro's flipped from a 1.5 point dog to a 1.5 point favorite. 82% of tickets, 91% of the cash. So the market read, money looks like it is coming in on Greensboro. That is what I agree with there. I like Middle Tennessee against UTEP. I think UTEP's kind of in free fall now, losing 4 straight games. It's just not that great here. Actually, excuse me, I think I like UTEP in this game. Excuse me, UTEP losing 4 straight games, but I actually think they're maybe in a bounce-back mode here because they'd face Liberty, Kennesaw on the road, Jacksonville State on the road. None of those are easy games. Then they lost at home to Western Kentucky coming off all that. Maybe it was a bad spot, but now this is going to be an in-season revenge spot, even though that also was. They got in-season revenge against Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee already beat UTEP once on the at Middle Tennessee by only 3, though. And now Middle Tennessee, they've been hot, playing better recently, winning 4 of their last 5. Some of them against some decent teams. Now coming off that game against New Mexico State, but they're playing 2 straight road games out in the Southwest, basically, in New Mexico and Texas. So I don't know. And they got Liberty up next, which is a bigger game. They're probably going to be looking ahead to that Liberty game slightly there. So with UTEP having fallen down in the standings, it might make sense to maybe expect kind of a bounce back from UTEP finally. And the money looks like it agrees, up from 1 to 2 as a home favorite. 79% of tickets, 96% of the cash coming in on UTEP. And if the public looks at this game, they're going to see Middle Tennessee with the better record getting points and maybe think that looks a little bit tempting. I would go the other way with that, but I'm not going to play it. Cincinnati, they're on the outside looking in, man. I have them in, I think I have them about 8 teams away from being in the tournament right now, something like that. So they're highly likely to not make the tournament. But Houston, coming off 2 huge games against Iowa State and Texas Tech, huge wins. 3 of the last 4 games have been big, beating Arizona 2 games prior to those. Big wins, man. And they got Kansas and Baylor to finish the season. So this is kind of a sandwich spot because Kansas up in 2 days on ESPN, and then Baylor. Big names in the conference, even if they're down a little bit this year. So looks like a sandwich spot for Houston, man. So if I was going to do anything with this, I would take the points with Cincinnati in this one. And Cincinnati needs this game more as far as, they're trying to fight to get into the tournament here if they can. They did just beat Baylor. That's a big win for them, but I don't think you suffer a letdown when you're about to play Houston, man. And Houston, they're laying a lot of points, and they're a slow team that plays really good defense. They do score efficiently, too, but they play a lot of low-scoring games. This total, very low, down from minus 125 to minus 124.5. Houston down from minus 14.5 to minus 13.5 as a favorite. 51% of tickets, 84% of the cash coming in on the points on Cincinnati. I agree with Cincinnati, plus the points in that one. I don't quite want to do it, playing those 2 big teams back-to-back like that, 2 grinding, like kind of physical defenses in Baylor and Houston. I don't love it, but yeah, it would be Cincinnati or pass for me in this game. This game I expect to be defensive as well. Cincinnati also plays slow and plays defensive, so the total very, very low here. And as low as it is, I think the under still might make sense in this game as well. Public actually coming in on the over, 67% of the tickets and only 54% of the cash on the over there. Looks like way too low a total almost, but it's expected, man, with these 2 teams being really slow-paced defensive teams. Could be a low-scoring game in that one. Creighton's at Xavier, and I think Xavier has more motivation here in this game on Fox. Xavier already lost at Creighton, so it is a little bit of it's in-season revenge for Xavier. And Xavier, I think they're going to be the more motivated team here, man, because Creighton, they're going to be in the tournament unless like something really, really bad happens. I don't think they're really in danger at all. But Xavier, I have them as one of the first 4 out right now. They're kind of sitting kind of right there. Like they could make a move to try to get really in the conversation there. So I think Xavier is the more motivated team here for all those reasons. There isn't really much of a scheduling setup here, but I think the motivation sets up more on the Xavier side for that reason. The public is going to want to come in on Creighton, who's kind of the better offensive team. They have the better looking record. They're actually at 2nd in the Big East standings right now. So the public's going to see this. Oh, I'm getting points with Creighton. Looks kind of tempting. The better offense, basically, with the better record, but I'm not going to look that way. I think it would be Xavier or pass here. Xavier up from minus 1.5 to 2 with juice, 51% of the cash on them, 61% of the tickets on Creighton. So the money is coming in on Xavier. The market read looks like it is on Xavier. Actually, it's now 57% of the cash on Creighton, but still the money percentage looks like it's more on Xavier than it is on Creighton. Next up will be another play for me, and hopefully, like I said, some of these leans are probably going to come through, whereas some of my actual plays won't, so I do hate that, but it's just the nature of the game, man. I'm going to play in Houston Christian +4 in this game against Northwestern State. I think there are multiple reasons to do this. Northwestern State's up from 4 to 4 with juice, though, so you might be able to get 4.5 on this. I don't agree with that move. Northwestern State, there are a lot of situational angles that I look for in this game. They just had 2 straight road games, and they won at Southeastern Louisiana on the road. Big win there. Sela is one of the top teams in the Southland Conference, man. Northwestern State got road revenge against them too, because Northwestern State had lost to them at home the first time, and now they went out on the road and they beat Selah as 7.5-point underdogs. A big win for Northwestern State as a pretty big underdog, man. And they were losing this game by double digits in the second half, came all the way back and won the game. And let me look at the box score here. Selah actually had a really bad shooting performance, 20% from three, whereas Northwestern State shot 43.8% from three and 51.1% from the field. You're not going to see that again, I don't think. That's kind of an outlier for this Northwestern State team. That was a big win for them and kind of some outlier shooting there in that game. So I think we're going to get a little bit of regression out of Northwestern State. And even though it's only against Incarnate Word, it wasn't very good. That is still a big game because it is senior day for Northwestern State. So they do have Incarnate Word, which I believe they haven't played them otherwise this year. Oh, no, they did. They beat them on the road by 2, excuse me. So it's not revenge, but it is that's their senior night up in 2 days. Houston Christian, by the way, you want to talk about road revenge. Northwestern State already beat Houston Christian early in conference play. There it is. On the road by 7 points. So this is road revenge for Houston Christian. So I like how that sets up as far as that's concerned as well, as ESPN won't load. Houston Christian, I mean, their record doesn't look as good either. The record's ugly. Both teams with ugly records, so I kind of like that aspect of it too. Houston Christian had lost 4 games in a row, although losing to Selah, Texas Rio Grande Valley, A&M, Corpus Christi, and Lamar. Those are all pretty decent teams, man, and 2 of them on the road. So I think Houston Christian, we've reached a point where maybe they're not as bad as they look on that recent stretch, because those are pretty good teams, and they kind of play competitively in almost all of those games. So I think that's good. And then they finally won against Stephen F. Austin. So that's a pretty big win. That was their senior day. But are they going to be in a letdown when they're they still have games to play, and this is going to be in-season revenge? No, I think they're going to be focused on this game, even though they are coming off that senior day win. I think that win serves to break that losing momentum and give them some new momentum coming into this game. So I like it. I like Houston Christian in this game. And the Ken Bomb stuff kind of checks out as well here with Northwestern State. Not a good team at 242nd ranked. I mean, neither of these teams are good, but they're 59th in luck. So Ken Bomb is telling you they're not even as good as their record looks, and they're 331st in tempo, so they play a slow tempo as well. Not great on either side of the ball. Better defensively than offensively, in the bottom third in both, really, for the most part. And then you look at Houston Christian, who's right down here, only 20-something spots lower. They're a little bit lower in the luck index at 133, so still a little bit high. Maybe they're overperforming a little bit, but not as much as Northwestern State is. And Houston Christian, yeah, they're in the bottom third in both offense and defense as well, so that's kind of the case with both teams, so not a whole lot to see there. Houston Christian also does play slow, so the tempo, just overall, you know, a lot of it just kind of looks like, yeah, I mean, to me, it looks like it's kind of a close matchup, really, to be honest, and I think Ken Bum has this line at about 3. He has the Oregon game at, I believe, 8, by the way, and he has Fairleigh Dickinson winning by 1, I think, and he has VMI. Took him at plus 9.5. I think he has that line at about 8. So we are getting some line value there. Ken Bum's numbers are kind of right in line with all of these. So I will take Houston Christian here. I think the slow pace is fine because they also like to play that pace. I think the spot sets are better for them. So that's going to be that play. Western Michigan, I would look to fade them and play Northern Illinois. They already beat Northern Illinois, only by 2, though. So they beat them by 2 as a 10.5-point favorites. That's one thing where, yeah, it's going to be in-season revenge for Northern Illinois, but Western Michigan was the significantly better team and almost lost the game. So they might remember that for that reason. They actually blew a big lead in that game and wound up almost losing. So that might actually have them motivated a little bit. But then you look at all the other aspects of this game, I think it's a sandwich spot. Western Michigan, as I said, they caught Ohio in a sandwich spot, and that was Ohio being in a sandwich spot. I played Western Michigan in that game. They got the win, big outright win. And after Northern Illinois here, they got their final home game against Kent State, who's moving up the rankings and probably is actually the second best team in this conference at this point. So this is kind of a sandwich spot for Western Michigan, and it's a road revenge spot, or not a road, not a road revenge spot, excuse me, a home-and-home revenge spot, in-season revenge for Northern Illinois. It's just the problem that I have is that Northern Illinois did scare Western Michigan early in the season. Northern Illinois is definitely the worst team in this game, but it almost looks too easy almost to lay the points with Western Michigan here. They're down from 4-4 with a little bit less juice. mind kind of moving against them. So, yeah, I would take the points with Northern Illinois if I was going to play that game. Little Rock and SIU Edwardsville are battling for the 2 seed in the OVC here pretty much. I think Little Rock is the better of these two teams, and it's in-season revenge, I believe. Or no, it's in-season revenge for SIUE, excuse me. Little Rock beat SIUE at home. Now Little Rock's going out on the road, but Little Rock, even though it is a second straight road game, I think they were looking ahead to this game, man, because they lost to Eastern Illinois. That was a revenge game for Eastern Illinois, I believe. Or no, it was not. Why am I saying that? I keep forgetting what these teams even did. Excuse me, it was not. Eastern Illinois actually season swept Little Rock, which is crazy. So Little Rock, that's an ugly loss there, and maybe they'll be in a bounce-back mode from that. But for SIU Edwardsville, it is a revenge spot because they did lose to Little Rock earlier in the season, and this is their final home game, so it is senior day for SIU Edwardsville. They're coming off that loss to SEMO, which SEMO is the top team in this conference at this point, Southeast Missouri State or whatever, Southeastern Missouri State. So I think as far as like the situation is concerned, I guess I would say the lean would be a little bit more on the SIU Edwardsville side, man, just because those motivational standpoints I think maybe makes a little bit more sense for them, but they're sitting at a 2-point favorite, so the odds makers are telling you Little Rock is the better team, and Little Rock's got 75% of the cash coming in on them with 60% of the tickets on Edwardsville, so the market read looks like the money is coming in on Little Rock for now, and I'm not sure that I agree with that, but it's a tough handicap for me. I'm not going to play it. Southeast Missouri State, they have nothing to really play for here as they already won the OVC, Ohio Valley regular season. They might have done it actually multiple games ago because they're 3 games up. Excuse me. So they might have clinched the game before the previous game, and they really didn't slow down as they beat SIU Edwardsville, but now they're on this roll, man. They've won so many games in a row, but now they get Eastern Illinois on the road to finish the season, and the game doesn't really matter for Southeast Missouri State, for SEMO, and they already beat Eastern Illinois once by 7. So this game, and it is Eastern Illinois' senior day, although they are coming off a big win themselves over at Little Rock, I think the game means more to them. SEMO, they're already in the 1 seed. They don't really care about this game as much. Eastern Illinois is also still kind of jockeying for seeding at least slightly. But I think the game means more because it's senior night and they do have the best team in the conference coming into their place. But they did also just beat the second best team in the conference. But the market read does look like it's agreeing with Eastern Illinois here, and I do agree with that. Southeast Missouri State down from 6 to 5.5. They really don't have a whole lot to play for here. 50% of tickets on them, 71% of the cash coming in Eastern Illinois. So not a play for me. I mean, I'm trying to decide, like, there are just these small factors, like Eastern Illinois playing 2 big games in a row, that I'm like, that'll just keep me off of it a little bit. It's just kind of how I read these games and how my mind works. SMU is a bubble team. I have them in the first 4 out, I believe. I have them 3 or 4 teams, maybe 4 or 5 teams away from being in the tournament. They're playing a second straight game on the Pacific Coast, which isn't really that easy, man. And they did beat Stanford at SMU already by 24 points. So it is a bit of a revenge game for Stanford. Not an easy spot, although SMU can't afford to lose any games at this point. So they should be motivated here, but it's a fairly difficult spot for them. Stanford just kind of staying at home. They came off that game against Cal, and actually that's a big rivalry game. With SMU up next, you would have expected they wouldn't have played that well against BC. My BC Eagles, basically, but Stanford didn't even suffer a sandwich spot in that game. They easily won against this bad BC team anyway. So this game, tough read in this game, man. SMU's down from 3 to a pick'em, though. So it looks like they're Public's coming in on the team that has a prettier looking record, and the team they know is like kind of being talked about as far as, oh, they need to win because they're on the bubble. 87% of the tickets on them, but only 78% of the cash. So they're a Public team. Looks like a pretty strong market indicators on the Stanford side, with the line having moved big. But of course, if you like Stanford, you much rather would have played them at +3 than at a pick'em price. But the line has moved all the way down, man, against where the Public is coming in. So some crazy movement in that game. Let's keep going. We're getting into the later games here. Some of these games I'm skipping. Wake Forest, I mean, they need to win, but they might be dead at this point, man. I mean, they do have Duke up next, and I don't know if that's going to be a look ahead, because basically they might be thinking, well, if we get that win against Duke, I mean, that's not going to happen on the road against Duke. They're going to be probably like a 13, 14-point underdog in that game, I would guess, something in that ballpark. So they're probably not going to win that game, but they might be thinking, well, that's our ticket, like if we win that game. But they got to not overlook Notre Dame, man, and maybe they won't because they've lost 3 out of their last 4 games. Really ugly. I forgot about NC State in there, too. These losses are totally detrimental, man. I got Wake Forest, like 7 or 8 teams out of the field right now. So it's looking pretty bad for them, but of course, they cannot afford to lose to Notre Dame here, man. So, but the spot, I don't know, man. I don't know. The line is up on Wake Forest from 8.5 to 10, so money is coming in on them. 71% of tickets, 90% of the cash. So strong market indicators coming in on Wake Forest, but pressure is on them, and when the pressure's on you, sometimes you don't want to lay that many points with the team either. So we're staying off of that game as well. Missouri at Vandy. This is an interesting one. Missouri ranked at 14th in the country. Coming off that bounce-back blowout win over South Carolina. Big win there. I don't know if they're going to be feeling too high on themselves coming into this game against Vandy, but it is going to be revenge for Vandy as Missouri already beat them at Missouri by 9 points. Missouri does have Oklahoma and then Kentucky to finish the season, but really that Kentucky game is the big one. I don't know that any of these games are really that big. Missouri, I don't know. I don't know what their motivational standpoint is going to be coming into this game, man, but I think it's a better spot for Vandy because Missouri might just be feeling kind of high. Beating anybody by 40, you kind of feel a bit high on yourself. They already beat Vandy once this year. Vandy is obviously one of these teams that's less securely in the tournament. I have Vandy in the last 4 buys right now, or somewhere close to the last 4 buys. I think I have them. Maybe I have them a little bit further in the tournament than that. I have them in the round of 64 right now because they've pulled off some huge wins, man. They've played 5 ranked teams in a row and won the last 2 against Ole Miss. And then on the road against Texas A&M, huge win there. So I don't want to come in and try to play Vandy after that either, even though they should still be motivated. And this is kind of the biggest remaining game, although they do have bubble teams up next. So those are going to be bubble battles, man. Kind of crazy. The bubble boys battling Arkansas and Georgia, all those teams trying to fight to get into the tournament. So I don't know, man. So I don't love the spot, how it sets up for either team in this game. Maybe the argument would be that Vandy may have more of the motivation in this game. I guess I should say Missouri up from 2 to 2.5. 60% of tickets, 85% of the cash coming in on Vandy, though. So the money looks like it is coming in on Vandy. I don't know if I necessarily would disagree with that. Again, the spot doesn't look great for either team. Let's keep rolling here. Indiana has to go to Washington here. They got to go to the Pacific Coast. That's difficult, man. Again, it's an unfamiliar venue. So if Indiana's going to lose a game, it may be this one, as they're coming off some big games where they beat Michigan State. Actually, they played Michigan close. They played Purdue close way back here, lost to Wisconsin, played Michigan close, beat Michigan State on the road, played UCLA close, beat Purdue. So Indiana really has kind of started playing better basketball. And then they beat Penn State. Didn't really suffer the letdown. I'd mentioned they didn't cover, I don't think, but Indiana still... They're playing to try to get these wins, man, because they're trying to play their way into the tournament. And right now, I think they've played themselves into the round of 64, man, in my opinion. So they might be feeling a little bit better right now, not having to go out onto the road to face Washington, and their final games are bigger against Oregon and Ohio State. Somehow this run, I think, they have to suffer some sort of down spot in the schedule, I would imagine, even though they maybe feel like they have to keep winning because they're trying to get into the tournament and they can't really afford a loss here. But I think this game would be Washington or pass in this game. And it's an unfamiliar venue for Indiana as well, unfamiliar to travel out to the West Coast. Washington, they've lost 3 games in a row. Coming back home, though, and a lot of times when you lose games on the road and you lost your last home game, you come back and you do have a bounce-back spot type of game there, and that may be what we're looking at with Washington there. And again, I don't think it's going to be easy for Indiana to go out to the Pacific Coast either. And have they gone out to the Pacific Coast yet this year? They probably have not. No, they have not. And I believe they haven't been that great on the road either. Let me see. On the road, they've lost to Nebraska. They beat Penn State. Lost to Iowa, which isn't great. Beat Ohio State. Lost to Northwestern. Lost to Purdue. Lost to Wisconsin. So we're at 2-5. 3-5 on the road actually isn't really that bad. Beating Michigan State, so I don't know. But teams usually a little bit worse on the road than at home. But the spot, to me, it doesn't look that great for Indiana. So I would fade Indiana. The line's down from 3 to 1.5, so the market does look like it's strongly agreeing with Washington here. You could still get points as an underdog with Washington here. 68% of the tickets on Indiana, 68% of the cash on Washington. So some strong market indicators on Washington. Central Connecticut, as I mentioned, they've already clinched the 1 seed in the Northeast Conference. So they don't have a whole lot of a reason to show up in this game at Wagner. And they did already beat Wagner, I believe, not that long ago. Is that right? Oh, no, actually, excuse me, they lost to Wagner at home. Never mind. So this is actually road revenge for Central Connecticut. No wonder why I stayed off of this game. So never mind. This is actually road revenge. Central Connecticut lost a 10.5-point favorite in that game to Wagner. So they may actually show up for this game just to try to get revenge against Wagner, even though Central Connecticut is probably looking forward to the NEC tournament, where they will be the 1 seed. Wagner, this is their senior day, and they are coming off that loss to Long Island on the road. So still the lead probably makes sense to grab Wagner plus the points there. But the fact that they did beat Central Connecticut once gives me a little bit of hesitation. And Central Connecticut's up from 7.5 to 8. So some movement on them. Although I don't know if there's that much weight to put on that. I don't know. But again, I'm going to stay away. Boise, I think they're in a letdown spot. They're coming off that big win over Utah State. That's a huge win. Actually beating New Mexico, then not suffering the sandwich spot against Nevada, where I lost on Nevada in that game, then beating Utah State, and now they got to go on the road to face Fresno, who they already beat at home by 22 points. Not a very good spot for Boise, in my opinion, man. So this would be Fresno or pass, but Fresno, I don't know that I would want to come in and play an awful team like Fresno, and their only win on the entire conference slate is a home win against the other worst team in the conference in Air Force. I don't know that I could do it. Boise, a huge favorite, up from 15 to 17. I mean, that is a lot to be laying on the road in a spot like that, though. So it would still be Fresno or pass in that game. Let's keep going. Oh, man. Marquette is at Georgetown. Marquette, 21st ranked in the country right now, coming off a 30-point win over Providence. A nice blowout bounce-back win. Now they're going to go on the road, face Georgetown. They already beat Georgetown at home by 8, and after this, they have 2 much bigger games against UConn and St. John's, and those are both revenge games, and St. John's is the final home game, senior day. So Marquette may overlook Georgetown, man. I think it is a look-ahead spot. I don't think it's the greatest spot for them. Georgetown, I mean, not having a great season, but you got Marquette coming into your place, man. They just went out on the road and lost 2 games by double digits, but now they're coming back home where they did win their last home game. They have been pretty significantly better at home, really, than on the road, even though they lost to DePaul at home, which really makes no sense. But other than that, I think it's a spot where it makes sense to look Georgetown's way in this one. Marquette up from 6.5 to 8.5, though. 84% of tickets, 89% of the cash, but they are public. I would look to take the points with G-Town, the Hoyas in that one, or I would pass the game. Next up, we got, I was projecting. The next play for me, I have them out of order here, is we are going to lay points with a slow-paced defensive team at Baylor here, and that's just because I think they're better than they look, and their opponent is just awful and in an awful spot. So we're going to lay 13.5 with Baylor against Oklahoma State. They're down, or actually you might be able to get 13 on this. They're down from 13 to 12.5 with juice. 85% of tickets, only 83% of the cash. So I don't like the looks of this market, but I think that you got to play Baylor in this game, man, or not play the game. I don't understand the market read on this. Oklahoma State, they're a really bad team, and they're coming off like their win of the season basically over Iowa State. That was a huge win at home, but remember, Iowa State has kind of been in a weird spot personnel-wise because they've had some injury issues, and 2 of their top scorers were out in the prior game, and then one of them came back in that game, but again, they had to kind of work him back in. I think he came off the bench, and they're trying to work his game back in, so they weren't really facing a full Iowa State team there, but still a big win for Oklahoma State, beating them by 6. Huge win for Oklahoma State. Now they got to go out on the road and face Baylor. Even though Baylor, they're a name team, I just don't like it. I do not like the spot. Baylor going to Waco, by the way, the day after the Waco, the Branch Davidian massacre anniversary, man, where the ATF massacred a bunch of innocent people and the Branch Davidians. Fuck the ATF, obviously. Burning women and children alive. How great is that? But that's not what we're here to talk about. But Baylor, are they going to be extra motivated? That would be an interesting thing to go look at how Baylor plays in their game that's closest to being around the Waco anniversary, man. I don't know, because Baylor, of course, is in Waco. But I think this is a major letdown spot for Oklahoma State. Baylor, they need wins because their record is so bad at this point, even though their resume is decent enough that they're still in the tournament right now. They actually have a win against St. John's, which is really helping them. That's a crazy win. St. John's has very few losses. So that's helping Baylor's resume. I have Baylor in. I've had them in all year. I still have them in the round of 64, but they're really starting to slide, man. So Baylor, they need to focus, man. They need to get some wins. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. They've lost 3 in a row. But, I mean, you're not going to blame them for losing at Houston. You're not really going to blame them for losing to Arizona, although I might because I played Baylor in that game. But Arizona's a good team. But then Baylor went out on the road. Tough spot, though, going to elevation to a place that they're not familiar with in Colorado. Then having to turn all the way back around and go all the way out to Cincinnati, which is another venue they're not really used to playing in. So I think we can kind of explain why they lost a bunch of these games, man. I think this is a return to form spot now for Baylor. They just went out on the road, lost multiple games in a row. They lost the last game they played on this floor at home. I think this is a very focused spot for Baylor here, man. They got to get this win. And Oklahoma, I mean, you look at this, you see these teams are almost similar in record. It's like, how are you laying 13.5? It almost looks ridiculous to lay 13.5 with a team that only has a record that's like 2 games better, both in conference and overall. But Baylor is really that much the better team over Oklahoma State, man. I mean, that's what Ken Pom will tell you. We can look at Ken Pom here. I think we're looking at a focus spot for Baylor. We're looking at a spot where I just don't think Oklahoma State's going to be able to continue what they did in the last game, 2 games in a row. They're just not good. Ken Pom has Baylor is actually the 30th best team in the country, and he has them way down in luck at 313th in luck. So he's telling you Baylor is a lot better than they look. They have the 5th strongest schedule in the country, man, and they face the number 1 defensive schedule in the country, so they have not had it easy. They faced a very difficult schedule. They play really slow at 302nd in tempo, which we know that, but their offense is actually efficient, so that may actually help, because a lot of times I don't like to play a slow team, laying points like this, but at least their offense is actually very efficient at 13th in the country, so even though they play slow, they score on a lot of their possessions, so that's going to help here. Only 70th in defense, which I don't love, but the slow pace should help in this game. In Oklahoma State, you got to go way down to find them. They're below being ranked 100th in Ken Pom's rankings. They're 101st in the country. They play the 24th fastest tempo in the country, so they play ridiculously fast, and Baylor plays really, really slow. And Baylor, obviously, they're the better team. They're at home, and slowing the pace down is easier. They should be able to slow this pace down and really make Oklahoma State uncomfortable. So I think that's going to be the case. Or I could see Oklahoma State really struggling in this game. Oklahoma State really not great on either side of the ball, though they're a little bit better defensively, but they're also way up in luck at 24th in the country in luck. So Ken Pom is telling you they're actually overperforming, and Baylor is significantly underperforming. He has Baylor winning this game, I think, by about 14. So that's what we got going on in this game. The Houston Christian game, by the way, I think he has that line being about 3, which I forgot to mention. I don't want to give out everything about Ken Pom, but you should pay for Ken Pom, by the way. It's only like $25 a year or something, 25 to 30 bucks a year, so it's almost nothing. You get a lot of solid analytics. He's still the best, although I like Bart Torvik as well. And Evan Maya is kind of rising up as far as like handicappers liking his stuff as well. But I'm old school. I like Ken Pom the best, and I like Bart Torvik second best. And usually their stuff is like going to tell you a pretty similar story as well. But anyway, yeah, all that being said, I like Baylor in that one. I'm laying the points with Baylor in that one, and that's for all those reasons that I just gave. I don't like the market reading that one, but I like Baylor. Next up, we're going to have 3 of these games in a row I have plays on. I got to talk about so many of these games, and oh shit, we're going to go past noon. It's going to be a 2-hour video. Let's get this done. Next up, what was the next game? Oh yeah, it was Wyoming plus the points. Wyoming plus 7.5. This is simple. This is on CBS Sports at 8 p.m. Oklahoma State Baylor isn't even on a big network, by the way. It's on ESPN Plus. San Diego State, they're in a huge letdown spot, man. I mean, they just had 2 big games where they went to Utah State, had a fairly close game, and then what did they do? They turned around and they beat New Mexico, which was not that long ago. It was the other night. Huge game. Now they have to go out on the road to face Wyoming, who they already beat at home by Only 2, though, so that gives you a little bit of pause because Wyoming actually gave them a game when they were 14.5-point underdogs. That scares me a little bit, but everything else looks good to me here. San Diego State does have UNLV up next, and they actually lost at home to UNLV, so that is actually a revenge game for them. And then they got Nevada to finish the season. So if they're going to overlook one of these games, I do think it's going to be this. I think that win over New Mexico is huge, and it will put them in a letdown spot, even though Wyoming did play them close in that game. And San Diego State, another reason why, I mean, you're taking a lot of points here, and this is another reason why I like looking at Wyoming here, and it's because Wyoming, both of these teams like to play really slow, and they play defense, which I will talk about more in a second when I look at KenPom, but that also is part of the reason why. San Diego State, I was going to say, I thought I played Wyoming in that first game. I don't think I did, though, because it doesn't look like it was that bad of a spot for San Diego State, really. So I think Wyoming just kind of matches up such that they play close games. And Wyoming, they've been awful. I mean, they've lost 7 of their last 8 games, with their only win coming at home against Air Force. But a few of these games have hung within the number, including at New Mexico and at home against Utah State, and of course at San Diego State. So they step it up a lot of times playing these better teams. And this is Wyoming's senior day, man. It's senior night for them. This is their final home game with San Diego State coming into their place, which is they're a very named team in this conference. And Wyoming's just on this really bad stretch. And they've also lost, 3 of these last 5 games are on the road, though, and they lost every road game. And they lost their last home game pretty badly against a not very good San Jose State team. So I like Wyoming in this game, man. And then again, if you look at KenPom, yeah, San Diego State is obviously the better team, but they're a little bit down this year. Their offense is actually not very good. They're actually sub 100 offensively, according to KenPom. 10th in defense, and they play slow at 263rd in the country. 132nd in luck isn't that great, so they're a little bit lucky, according to KenPom. You got to go a bit down to find Wyoming. Where the hell is Wyoming? I thought they're actually down to 186. Geez, so they're worse than I thought. But Wyoming, they also are better defensively than offensively. 145th in defense. They play really slow as well at 307th. So you're going to get slow-paced defense. And you're going to get questionable offense in this game. Wyoming, yeah, they're up in luck a little bit at 164th. They've played a decently strong schedule, though, at 83rd in the country, so they're a little bit battle-tested, which isn't that bad either. San Diego State, of course, also has played a similarly difficult schedule and similar in luck index, too. But this is all about, again, the spot and the slow pace of this game, and this game being what I think is going to be an ugly defensive game. So taking the points at home, and it's senior day. So I think it does make sense, man. Paul, what's up, man? Top Lobster rob your mother. That's very Puerto Rican of him, man. Almost like he's black, almost. Why did he do that? You should. I don't think you should get revenge on him that way, though. You should go after Top, but don't go after his mama, man. Don't go after Mama Heavies. She's an awesome lady. She actually reminds me of my aunt, who, by the way, Nate is on my Italian side, one of my mom's sisters. I have one aunt who really is similar personality-wise to Top's mom. They remind me of each other, so I don't know. Top's mom almost feels kind of familiar to me for that reason. All right, in a very non-gay way. Next up, we got another play here. 3 games on the schedule in a row. UC Santa Barbara plus the points. I like this spot too, man. CS Northridge, Cal State Northridge sitting at 5.5. Not seeing a whole lot going on here. They have 89% of the cash on their side, though, and 50% of tickets evenly split, and I don't agree with that at all. We might see some of these later games, you might see these market percentages start to shift around, because I'm hoping, at least, I don't think my handicapping as far as the situation is that off, and even if it is, well, whatever. I disagree with the market on these. I think I can read these situations, and Cal State Northridge, this situation, I think, is a fade spot. I mean, they were rolling, man. They had a bunch of wins in a row. They'd won 7 games in a row, including winning on the road at UC Irvine. Big game. And then I actually faded them off of that game, and they still actually won, although I won my bet because UC Davis still covered as the home underdog in that game against Northridge. But Northridge still got out of there with the win. It was a sandwich spot and a letdown spot after that huge win at UC Irvine. They had UC San Diego up next, and they lost to UC San Diego. And now, when you're on a roll like this, man, you've won 7 games in a row, and then you lose a game like that, I think you're going to be a little bit hungover coming into the next game, man. That loss, a type of loss like that can linger, and they almost were able to pull off the wins against both of these top teams in the conference, man. They were within one possession in the final minute of this game, so they almost were able to pull off the wins against Irvine and San Diego, who were the top two teams in this conference and are right above Northridge. Now Northridge has to go face UC Santa Barbara coming off of that, staying at home. But UC Santa Barbara, by the way, oh yeah, they beat UC Santa Barbara on the road, actually, after Cal State Northridge had gotten blown out by UC San Diego the first time on the road. They actually bounced back from that, beat UC Santa Barbara on the road, and that was what began the win streak for Cal State Northridge. Northridge is the better team, that's true, but that means this is road revenge for UC Santa Barbara as well. And you know I like these avenging road underdogs, man. It's not the only thing that I'll use. Like, I won't just blindly play an avenging road underdog, of course. I'd have way too many plays. Too many of them would lose. So when it's coupled with a spot that I already think is a bad spot, it just kind of compounds the whole thing. So I do really like this spot in fading Cal State Northridge here. And by the way, they have Riverside up next, and Riverside is actually right behind them in the conference standings. Even though Santa Barbara also is, Riverside is actually closer in the standings to Northridge than UC Santa Barbara is. Then they have their final home game against Hawaii. So for all those reasons, I think this is a spot where it doesn't look that great for Northridge. Cal State Santa Barbara is on a 3-game win streak right now. None of these wins are that impressive, but I really think it's just kind of momentum for them. They're just kind of rolling along. Yes, they do have UC Irvine in their final home game next. So do you really think they're going to overlook the team that's in third place in the conference right now and a team that beat them on their own floor by 8 or whatever it was? I don't think so. I like UC Santa Barbara plus the points in this one. Ken Baum, I think, only has this line at about 3 or 4, so I think you're getting a decent number in that respect. Cal State Northridge, he actually has almost in the top 100, so pretty good. They play really fast, at 12th in the country. They're 115th in luck, though, so he's telling you they've overperformed a little bit luck-wise. They're pretty balanced offensively and defensively, just an okay team in both. Santa Barbara, not that much further down, man. They're only down 20 spots lower than Northridge here, and they're also fairly balanced. It's just slightly worse, but fairly balanced. They play a slower tempo, but sometimes you're able to slow the game down a little bit, even if you're on the road, man. It's a little bit easier to slow the game down, so Northridge is going to try to throw them off and run and get this game fast, and Santa Barbara may, at least when they have possession, be able to slow the game down a bit. And Santa Barbara is also way lower in the luck index than Northridge is at 255th. So Ken Baum is kind of telling you Santa Barbara underperforming a little bit, Northridge overperforming a little bit. And that coupled with everything about the spot here, it's UC Santa Barbara plus the points. I'm turning Asian. Plus the points for me in that one. Georgia, Texas, there's so many big games I got to talk about. I mean, this is crazy. So many games left. This is insane. This is a big game on ESPN2. I thought I was almost done getting into the night slate here. This is a huge game, too. Georgia, they're coming off beating Florida, man. So you would think, well, that's going to be a letdown spot, right? That was a huge win against Florida. Big upset win for Georgia. But I don't think so because Georgia is still fighting to get into the tournament, man. So I don't think they can afford a letdown here, man. They lost 4 games prior to that, all against ranked teams. And yes, they faced 5 ranked teams in a row. So it is going to be a difficult spot for them, though. Coming off that big win over Florida, I have Georgia in the first 4 right now. So they're in the last 4 teams in the tournament, playing in Dayton, according to my bracketology. But so is Texas, and that's who they're playing here. So both of these teams are going to have the same type of motivation here. And I think Georgia might be a little bit flatter coming into this game. They are also going to an unfamiliar venue, having to go to Austin, Texas, because Texas is new to the SEC. Makes it a little bit more difficult. So I do think the spot is a bit more difficult for Georgia coming into this one. And Texas may need the game slightly more than Georgia as well, because their resume a little bit worse than Georgia's, and they've been really on a slide as well, losing 6 of their last 7 games with that win against Kentucky kind of keeping them afloat. But they really can't afford these losses. I really thought they were going to be able to win that game against Arkansas in revenge, and they didn't do it. Shockingly bad loss to South Carolina, really. So they're coming off some real ugly losses. So I do think the spot does set up better for Texas here. Playing at home here against Georgia, I would lean to the Texas side in this one. The market looks to disagree with it. Texas down from 5.5 to 5 with juice. 79% of tickets, 69% of the cash. The odds makers are telling you Texas is actually the slightly better team here. And they have decently strong home court here as well, especially against teams that aren't familiar with going to their place. So I disagree with where the market percentages are right now, at the very least. I lean to Texas slightly in that one, but It's not going to be one of those ones where I just go in and almost blindly fade a team and I think is in a letdown spot. I'm not going to do that there. And then at 8:30 on SEC Network, we got number 12 Texas A&M at number 3 Florida. Another big game here. Texas A&M have lost 3 games in a row. They were almost in the they were actually in the discussion for like a 2 seed, which that's probably not going to happen anymore. They're probably looking at about a 3 seed. But now they're going out on the road to face Florida. Could be a bounce back spot for them. They lost 3 games in a row. They do have Auburn up next on senior night, but they're not going to overlook Florida. And I think this may be the only time they play Florida this year. So maybe a somewhat focused spot for them, but it's also going to be a focused spot for Florida because, again, they just lost that game to Georgia. But maybe Florida's in the slightly worse spot because when you're rolling along like that, and you take a loss like that, again, it can linger a little bit, even though, yeah, they might still want to step it up for Texas A&M here. They got Alabama up next, and they do have Ole Miss in their final home game there. So it is possible that maybe it is a slightly better spot for Texas A&M in this game. Florida, though, they're going to try to run, man. Florida plays really fast. Texas A&M tries to play really slow. So it is going to be a pacing mismatch where Texas A&M may fall victim to that as Florida's really going to try to run here. Florida, though, when they suffer a loss like that, and now they might not be in the conversation for the 1 seed anymore, kind of a brutal loss. So Florida definitely balanced here offensively and defensively. And Texas A&M, Ken Bob is actually telling you they're overranked right now, and that's mostly because their offense is actually not very efficient. They're actually really good defensively. So actually both these teams are actually really good defensively. A&M slows it down, 225th in tempo. So this game, it may even make sense. I think Texas A&M's correlated to the under here, and the odds makers have thrown the total up kind of right in the middle here of it not being a very high-scoring game or a very low-scoring game. I think because they don't know, like, is Florida going to be able to really run, or is Texas A&M going to be able to slow this game down? I think if you like Texas A&M here, you probably also like it to go under. I might agree with both of those, actually, because at least for the under, what you are looking at is that both teams are actually really good defensively. Florida up from 9 to 9.5, 55% of tickets, 57% of the cash. So the money looks like it's coming in a little bit on Florida. I slightly disagree with that, though. I think maybe Texas A&M plus the points would be the slight lean there, and maybe to the under. Arizona at Iowa State, number 22 and number 9. Arizona, they're coming off kind of a nice bounce-back win, smashing Utah. But now they got to go to Iowa State, and this is an unfamiliar venue, man. Arizona's been playing most of their games at home. They won at Baylor, yeah, but going to Iowa State, I mean, Ames, Iowa, this is a better team than Baylor. Iowa State, that's not going to be an easy environment for Arizona to go into, man. Arizona, again, not used to playing there because they're new to the Big 12, so that's going to probably give Iowa State a little bit extra home advantage. And I think Iowa State, we're going to get a little bit of value on the line because of what they've done recently. But what they've done recently is they lost to Houston. I mean, you're really going to blame them for losing to Houston on the road. And Iowa State was down their top 2 scorers in that game. They did have Momcilovic back in that game, so that's good for them. They got him back, but they were missing 2 of their starters, 2 seniors, I think, in that game. So, and they still played well without them. So they stepped it up for that. And then I think that's kind of why they just suffered a letdown spot in the next game and a hangover spot. Second straight road game, and they had an awful game against an awful Oklahoma State team. So this really looks like it's a bounce back spot for Iowa State here, man, coming off of that. And you got to look at their personnel because I know one of their guys already came back in the last game, but he came off the bench in that Oklahoma State game. You got to look. I think Gilbert is the other guy who isn't back yet. And if he plays as well, then Iowa State's going to be back to full strength in this game if all those guys are back. So you're looking at an Iowa State team that might actually be a little bit under the radar because they've lost some of these games while they were dealing with injuries, man. Iowa State, they were without Momcilovic, I think, in a couple of these games somewhere in here. And then again, they lost Gilbert, and I forget the other guy's name, but it lost a couple of guys going into this game against Houston, and one of them is back, but I think they had to kind of work him back into the rotation, so he actually didn't start, as I mentioned, in that game against Oklahoma State, and he may be back to a full complement of minutes in this game, which should help as well. And it's revenge for Iowa State, because remember, Iowa State went to Arizona, and I had Arizona in that game, and I kind of got lucky because Arizona was losing that game, and if you remember, they tied it in regulation on a Caleb Love, like, half-court shot, 3-pointer to tie the game just to send it into overtime, and then Arizona dominated overtime and won the game by 11, which that game was way closer than that 11-point final makes it look. So this is going to be revenge for that for Iowa State. They probably feel like they should have won that game. They're going to want to handle Arizona here, and Iowa State likes to play slow. Arizona, likes to play fast. So Iowa State's going to probably have the pacing advantage in this game as well. So I like Iowa State for that reason as well. I'm not going to play the game close to being a play for me. Iowa State's up from 4 to 6, 81% of tickets, 92% of the cash coming in on Iowa State. I agree with that move and that number there, but KenPom does actually have Arizona ahead of Iowa State, so he actually has this number at like 3 or 4, so he is kind of telling you, yeah, Arizona is better than they look, so that scares me a little bit there. So I'm going to stay away from that one. The number may be a little bit high at this point there, but Iowa State, if you want to like money line them, maybe parlay them up on the money line, I would not really argue with you there. St. Mary's is hosting Oregon State on CBS Sports in this late game here. St. Mary's coming off that game against Loyola Marymount, where I played Loyola Marymount because St. Mary's had finished the season sweep of Gonzaga, and I was wrong. They had actually done it before, but it's pretty rare that they do it. They hadn't done it for years. That was a big, big win for St. Mary's. So they were in a sandwich spot, man, between that game against Gonzaga, season sweeping them, and having this final home game against Oregon State and senior night. I think that was a bad spot for St. Mary's, and now this is probably going to be a bounce-back spot for them. They're laying what looks like a ton of points in this game, man, for Oregon State to be getting here. With Oregon State, a team that doesn't have a bad record. It looks like a lot of points to be getting here. Oregon State playing 2 big games in a row. They just lost on their senior day against San Francisco. Kind of a brutal loss because they were in revenge. I don't know how they lost that game. Now they have to turn around and go back out on the road for a 3rd road game in 4 days to an unfamiliar venue because Oregon State isn't familiar with these venues, and they haven't really done that well in some of these venues here, these weird, smaller venues where the crowd is closer to you, so they're not used to it. And St. Mary's on senior night is probably going to be wild, even though St. Mary's has already clinched the 1 seed in this tournament. They're still going to want to show up for that, I think, even though they did already beat Oregon State once, I believe. Yeah, they did. So it is road revenge for Oregon State. Oregon State lost by 14 there at home, but the spot doesn't look great. I think it would be St. Mary's or pass here, but St. Mary's is actually down from 12.5 to 12. 72% of tickets, only 60% of the cash on the side of St. Mary's. So the market read looks like it's completely against it. Maybe because the feeling is that St. Mary's doesn't really need to win this game. But it is, again, it is senior night, which might keep them motivated. St. Mary's does also play really slow, and they play defensive, so maybe it's not the greatest position for them to cover a large spread as a favorite, but whatever. And then my final play is West Virginia plus the points. I like the fade of Baylor here, man. BYU. I'm not fading Baylor. No, I'm on Baylor. I'm fading BYU. BYU has won 5 games in a row, and they've put themselves solidly in the tournament, man. Like, the bracketologies now have them on like the 8 or 9 line, and I have them, I think, on an 8 or 9 in mine as well. They actually can afford probably a loss and still be in the tournament this one because of what they've done recently, including beating Kansas, just blowing them off the court, and then winning on the road at Arizona on questionable foul calls. I will put that out there. That is true. Then they came off of that game, and I thought they were going to be in a letdown spot there. I said, this is where they're going to be in a letdown. They're ranked now. They're basically being considered to be in the tournament now, and they didn't even lose that game. 2 games in a row in unfamiliar venues in Arizona. They beat Arizona State too. Now they're coming back home. Now I think this is the letdown spot. And they got Iowa State up next on the road. Big game in 3 days. And for West Virginia, oh yeah, that win streak, kind of just like I talked about with Cal State Northridge starting their most recent win streak with beating UC Santa Barbara. BYU started their win streak beating West Virginia on the road by 4. So now this is road revenge for West Virginia. Kind of quick turnaround time road revenge because that wasn't that long ago. Multiple reasons to look for West Virginia here. And West Virginia is going to be the more motivated team here as well. And they're getting a ton of points. That's what you want. You want to motivate an underdog, man. And they're going to really be trying to win the game. And they're getting points against maybe a team that's more questionable motivation. West Virginia's fallen behind BYU, man, as far as being in the tournament. I have West Virginia as one of the last 4 teams in the round of 64 now, so they really need to be careful. They've lost 3 of their last 5. They got to win against TCU in their last game, which might help them give them some momentum going forward. The one thing that worries me a little bit is, yeah, this is an unfamiliar venue. They're having to go out into elevation, but I just think the spot sets up good for them. You can actually get a better number on this. Now, BYU's up from 9.5 to 10.5 with juice. 77% of tickets, 81% of the cash on them, and I do not agree with that move. I like West Virginia. You can get them at a better price now. We can lock it in. Actually, let me just edit it right now because I think you can get at least plus 10 on them, maybe 10.5. Grab the points with West Virginia there. And Ken Baum, by the way, I believe he has this one looking pretty good for that as well as BYU. He's got them 153rd in luck. Well, I don't want to look at the luck because I know he has West Virginia very lucky as well, actually 150th. So he actually has BYU slightly more lucky at this point. He has West Virginia's having faced a more difficult schedule, 18th strength of schedule and 6th defensive strength of schedule. So they've faced tougher opponents for the most part than BYU. BYU scores, but their defense isn't really that good, and they play kind of a mid-tempo game. West Virginia does like to play really slow, but BYU doesn't really run as much as we're kind of used to them running. Maybe they'll try to in this game. The game might wind up being slower, which is maybe more helpful to West Virginia. And West Virginia, even though their offense lacks at times, they're really good defensively. Ken Baum has them 14th in the country defensive efficiency-wise. So you're also getting the significantly better defense in a better spot, getting a lot of points. Yeah, again, West Virginia plus the points is the play in that one. So I like that one too. Hopefully this card's going to wind up being good today, man. And then I don't know if I want to talk about any of the rest of these games. Grand Canyon, I will say they're at Seattle. This line looks very misleading with Grand Canyon laying only down to 1.5 now. It's basically a pick-em price up in our 12 o'clock games have kicked off, and Penn State's already losing for me. So isn't that just fucking great? Grand Canyon, I mean, they got a dominant-looking record in this conference. Seattle has a horrific-looking record. You look at this and you think, how could you possibly not play Grand Canyon here where the line is basically just a pick the winner? That's because, as I've been saying all year, Seattle faced a difficult out-of-conference schedule, and Ken Baum has had them very, very underrated basically all year. So, and they almost beat Grand Canyon at home, although Grand Canyon might use that as motivation here. Seattle actually had a lead late in that game, and Grand Canyon turned it on late and wound up winning the game by 9. But Seattle was actually winning this game into the second half in this game. So maybe Grand Canyon will remember that, but they did kind of have the game in hand later in the game, up double digits, so maybe not. So I think maybe the revenge kind of still qualifies here for Seattle. Seattle, it's not, it is. It's their final home game, too, so it's senior day for them. They're coming off a blowout win over Cal Baptist, but still senior day in revenge against Grand Canyon. That would be the way that I would look if I was going to play that game. Grand Canyon, they don't really have that much left on the horizon either, though. They have their final home game up next. They're kind of just rolling along right now, so I don't know. It's not a play for me, but the line does look very misleading. Grand Canyon down from 4-1 now with 65% of tickets, 93% of the cash on Seattle. I saw Seattle plus 2.5 earlier this morning. Obviously, I'd prefer to get as many points as possible with that number, but I mean, Grand Canyon is still the better team. But yeah, you're looking at a spot where, yeah, the line looks very misleading. Then you got Gonzaga, San Francisco. This is a battle for the second place in the WCC. Very weird if we see Gonzaga not even being in the top 2 in the WCC. It's always St. Mary's Gonzaga. And if San Francisco gets in there, that would be crazy, especially considering that Gonzaga, as I keep telling you, is the better team over San Francisco. Ken Baum has them as maybe the unluckiest team in the entire nation, although he actually has them at 353rd, so they're in the bottom like 10 almost in luck, but still, Gonzaga, I mean, he's got them in 9th in the country. Nobody would ever think that because the results just haven't shown that yet. But San Francisco did lose at Gonzaga by double digits already, but now it is their final home game. So, yeah, they're going to want to step up for this. It will be a big game for them, but it is also a big game for Gonzaga, man. This is a battle for second place. And if both teams are going to show up in this game, I think revenge kind of gets thrown out the window. I mean, I think maybe Gonzaga. I mean, I keep leaning to Gonzaga just because I think they're kind of undervalued in a lot of cases. And you're looking at San Francisco being a very public underdog here because the public's going to come in and look at this and think, well, this line looks ridiculous, right? Gonzaga's laying 9 on the road. How am I getting that many points with San Francisco at home? Well, again, the odds makers are telling you which team is the significantly better team here. 80% of tickets, 68% of the cash on San Francisco, who looks like a public home underdog here. So I don't like that at all. That would be Gonzaga or pass. But let's move over to the other sports today, man, because we have huge cards. I mean, a huge board, excuse me. I got 2 NHL plays, trying to be kind of selective in the NHL here. And the first play is actually the first game up, which is in a half hour. So, holy crap, I almost didn't get it in time, but I got it in. I got you guys. It is the New York Islanders, minus 140, even though I'm not really a fan of the Islanders necessarily, or really a fan of playing them in a lot of spots. But Nashville, I think Nashville's in a letdown spot, even though, yes, Nashville, I keep saying they're better than they look, but that doesn't really turn into results, man. And they just beat Winnipeg. So they're coming off that big game against Winnipeg. And even though, yeah, they're starting a road trip here against the Islanders, they got the Rangers tomorrow, man. And the Rangers have really started turning it around. So I think this could be a sandwich spot, man. If they're going to pay attention to one of these 2 games, it's going to be the game against the Rangers, not the game against the Islanders. So I like all that. Again, Nashville, I just think it's also a huge letdown spot coming off beating Winnipeg. And I don't know if Saros is going to be back in net for them, or if they're going to switch to Anunen in this one. They may actually, if they're going to focus on the Rangers, let me actually look at starting goalies here. If they're going to focus on the Rangers, they might actually decide to rest Saros in this one and play him in the other game. Nope, he is confirmed. So we'll be Saros against Sorokin. So we're going to get the best goaltender from both teams in this game. So that's fine as well. I think the handicap is still fine. The Islanders coming off beating the Bruins, which I think that's just, I mean, the Bruins are so bad at this one. I think that's just kind of a good momentum starter for the Islanders. They had lost a bunch of games. They lost 2 games going into the All-Star break, lost 2 coming out of the All-Star break, but it was to Dallas and the Rangers. I mean, those are pretty decent teams, man. I expect the Rangers are probably going to wind up in the playoffs at this point. Going to Boston, they were able to get that win against Boston, break the losing streak, break the losing momentum, and now I think this is a better spot for them. Coming back home, not a big travel spot, really. Yeah, they got the Rangers up next in revenge, sure, but I think that's a good momentum spot there. Momentum continue for the Islanders. The Islanders are up from minus 133 to minus 134, so the money line has moved on them, but we got 66% of tickets on them and 56% of the cash on Nashville. I don't agree with that cash percentage. I agree with the line move, though, but hopefully that cash percentage won't bite me there, but that's the way that I look. Tampa is at Washington. This is going to be a good game, man. Washington has lost 2 games in a row. Pretty ugly, really, to Calgary. That was a bad spot against Calgary. They'd beaten Edmonton the game before that, and they'd won their last 2 games by a combined score of 15-6. So I think that was a natural kind of letdown spot. They lost to Calgary, then they turned around and they didn't bounce back, and they lost again to St. Louis. Not good. So this may be the spot where they're going to turn it around. Those were bad games, man, for Washington. They've kind of been alternating between Lindgren and Thompson in net as well. So I don't know which one you're going to get in this game, but I don't know that it matters. And Tampa, of course, they use Vasilevsky all the time at this point, but he's played so many games in a row. He's played a bunch of games coming out of the All-Star break, 3 games in a row. So is this a spot where they're going to rest him? I don't know, because Tampa has Florida up next, and they're coming off beating Calgary. So you got a Washington team that just lost to Calgary, and Tampa actually just beat Calgary. Both teams also, I believe, just beat Edmonton recently. Edmonton hasn't even won out of the All-Star break, which is crazy. So if the public's going to come in on this, I think they're going to want to play Tampa, because Tampa's won so many games in a row now, 7 in a row. Although most of them against not great teams, really. Really only the Edmonton one was really that impressive. So kind of a weak schedule there. But the public's going to see they just beat Calgary. They're on this huge win streak. Washington's lost 2 games in a row and lost to Calgary. So it almost looks pretty easy to take Tampa in this game, right, for that reason. So I don't even know which way I would lean here. Actually, what am I saying? All those things I just said, I would lean towards Washington to bounce back in this game. But the money doesn't look to agree. It looks like Tampa's flipped from a plus 105 dog to a minus 111 favorite here. Tampa flipping to the favorite on the road, 51% of tickets, 68% of the cash. Some money all coming in Tampa. I don't really agree with that. And the odds makers are telling you Tampa's the better team of these two, despite probably having still the worst of the 2 records. Crazy to think about, man. We have seen the Islanders line move up a little bit more as we get closer to game time. So I like seeing that as well. Calgary is at Florida. Florida just beat Edmonton, so it is possible they're kind of in a letdown spot here. Calgary just got smoked by Tampa, and they were in that letdown spot, I think, coming off that big win over Washington that I just mentioned. Second straight road game. Wasn't a great spot. Will they turn around and bounce back from that shutout? I don't know. Will Florida be feeling high on themselves after beating Edmonton? And they do have Tampa up next. Looks like a little bit of a sandwich spot, so I'd probably look towards Calgary in this game or just not play the game. I'm not playing it, but Florida's up from minus 220 to minus 260, so the money's coming in on them too. 79% of tickets, 98% of the cash coming in on Florida. I don't really agree with that either. I would look to maybe play a puck line on Calgary in that one, even though they are the worst of the two teams, so I don't know. My Bruins are at Pittsburgh, and I just don't know what I would do in this game. And Bruins were probably in a bad spot after they blew that game against Toronto. That was just horrific. 2 overtime losses in a row, but that Toronto one was a big game for them. And the way they blew that game and they had the game completely in hand, just awful. And I think they just didn't get back up off the mat after that. And maybe getting out of home will be a good thing for them. Go on the road, try to win a game against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, they're coming off an overtime game where they actually finally got a win against Philadelphia, which might give them a little bit of momentum coming into this game, but I don't know, man. And they got Toronto up next. The spot might actually be better for the Bruins in this game, but the market looks like it's against that too, with Pittsburgh up from minus 102 to minus 120. 60% of tickets, 52% of the cash on the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins look like a public road underdog in this one. I don't know that I agree with that, but moving on, my other play, this is my only other hockey play of the day, is the Detroit Red Wings at minus 110. You get them right at a pick 'em here. Actually, you might be able to get them as a dog now. Columbus looks like they're sitting at minus 110, or it might be just minus 110 both ways. 65% of tickets, 81% of the cash on Detroit. The odds makers are telling you Detroit is still the better of these two teams, as Columbus is not getting full home court here. Market percentage looks like it's coming in on Detroit, and I agree with it. It looked more so the case this morning, but even so, it looks pretty decent now. I think Columbus, they are not actually as good as they look on this recent run, man. If you look at the odds to make the playoffs, Columbus, even though they're in one of the wild card spots right now, the odds makers are still telling you that they actually think it's going to be, I believe, Ottawa and the Rangers, I think, are the teams that actually still have the best odds to get those wild card spots, so not Columbus. Columbus on a nice win streak here, man. They beat Chicago, and then they beat Dallas and Detroit. Some huge wins there for Columbus, but now I think this is a letdown spot, and it's a zigzag spot because they just beat Detroit on the road and basically embarrassed them 5-2. And you are going to get Columbus's better goaltender back in net here as Tarasov played the last game. Merzlikins, Elvis is going to be back in net here as Elvis is going to return to the building, but I don't even think that I care, man. I mean, Columbus is all about offense. Their offense is good. Their defense is pretty bad. Their goaltending isn't that good. So I think, all that being said, odds makers are telling you Detroit's the better team. They're in the zigzag spot here. Columbus just embarrassed them. Columbus just beat this Detroit team. They're coming back home off of these couple of big wins in a row. They got Tampa up next, and then Florida, then the Rangers, then New Jersey, then Vegas, then the Rangers again, then New Jersey again, then Florida again. So all of these games coming up, all on ESPN Plus, by the way. This game's on ESPN at 6 p.m. All these games coming up are bigger than this Detroit game, in my opinion. Even though Detroit is also kind of in the they're in the wild card hunt as well, I believe. I think they're sitting in one of the wild card spots as well. Detroit, again, coming off that loss to Columbus after they've beaten Minnesota, but I think this is the bounce back spot for them. I think it's a zigzag. I think that I think that Columbus is a little bit of a paper tiger here. Detroit is the better team in the zigzag spot, in the bounce back spot. Coming off that embarrassing loss, yeah, give me Detroit. Columbus also is the worst of the defenses. So I like all that. Montreal at Buffalo. Montreal's coming off almost losing to San Jose, and they just beaten Carolina the game before that 4-0. So a huge win for Montreal, shutting out Carolina. Then they played pretty poorly against San Jose. So I think it's going to be good for them to just get out on the road and start a road trip. Usually it's a decent focus spot going out on the road, whereas Buffalo, they did just lose pretty bad to Carolina. They're coming back home from that. I think Montreal probably in the slightly more focused spot here, in the more positive spot. Buffalo's down from minus 140 to minus 143, but 76% of tickets, 92% of the cash, So the cash is coming in on Buffalo, but I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I somewhat lean to the Montreal side there. And then Edmonton is at Carolina. I mean, this is a big game. Edmonton, as I said, is still not won. Coming out of the All-Star break, and I don't think this is the spot where it's going to happen, to be honest. I mean, some of these games are just embarrassing. This Edmonton defense is really starting to play poorly again. Not good from the goaltender position either, but they just face Florida, man, and that's that big Stanley Cup revenge type of spot there, and Edmonton fell just short, losing 4-3. You lose a game like that in a huge game that you get up for like that. They were down that one goal late in the game, had maybe some chances to try to tie that game. You lose the game, now you have to turn around right away and play Carolina with 1 day off. This is their 5th straight road game coming out of the All-Star break. They haven't won any of them, but I just don't think it's going to turn around in this game. Carolina is a good team, even though we've seen that trade kind of not working out for them, man. With what's the guy's name that they traded for? I can't even remember. Carolina. They traded Ncaab over to Colorado, and he looks like he's worked out better. He's for Rantanen, and he's a better defensive player, man. Rantanen more of an offensive player, but I just think Ncaab is the tougher player, man. So it's not working out. I think the Hurricanes should want like tougher players. That's not working out, but I think the spot is better for the Hurricanes here. They finally turned it around and got a win against Buffalo, so I think that's going to give them some momentum coming into this game after they hadn't won out of the All-Star break either, and they finally won a game. They played one fewer game out of the All-Star break. They're back home now, so a little bit less travel as well. So this would be Carolina would be the way I would lean in this one. They're actually up from minus 130 to minus 164, so some pretty significant movement on Carolina. 62% of tickets, 93% of the cash coming in on Carolina. I agree with that move in that one. LA at St. Louis is kind of a weird one. St. Louis just went on the road and beat Washington, and now they're returning back home, so does look like a letdown spot for St. Louis, man. Is they're not really the greatest team. They're on a nice little mini win streak here, but beating Seattle, not impressive, even though they did beat them 7-2, and I thought that was a sandwich spot. So actually, maybe I take that back. Blowing them out in a bad spot maybe is actually impressive. They actually played Winnipeg really close, then they beat Colorado. That's why I thought it was a letdown spot there. So I got caught fading the Blues twice in a row. Now they beat Washington. Now this may be the spot where they return home and they don't have the greatest game against LA with Dallas up next. Dallas is a big game, but LA is still a big game too, man. LA, they've been a good team, so St. Louis is probably still going to be focused, but LA has actually been a good road team, and LA is coming off an embarrassing loss, even though it was to Dallas. 6-2 loss. That's not great, but then they are playing a back-to-back, so they actually played yesterday, and St. Louis did not. St. Louis does have the day off, so this is a tough handicap here, man. A lot of reasons I would like the Kings. Actually, I don't know what I'm saying. The Kings have a losing road record. I don't know what I'm talking about. I thought they were better on the road than that. Don't listen to me at all, man. St. Louis is flipped from plus 100 to minus 110, so the money looks like it's coming in at St. Louis. I don't really agree with it. 73% of tickets, 90% of the cash coming in on them. Some of it might be because it is the back-to-back spot for LA, but I don't know, man. And then New Jersey is at Utah. New Jersey coming off an ugly loss, 5-1 at Colorado. They may turn this thing back around here, man. That's just a bad loss. Maybe they're used to the elevation now, having just played in Colorado. Utah just smoked Minnesota. So now they might be feeling pretty high on themselves after that. I played Utah in that game. I thought it was a bad spot for Minnesota in that game. Got it done with Utah in that one. They may still be focused, though, because New Jersey does still have a good record. So I'm not going to play it. But to me, New Jersey's the better team, and I think they're going to be in the spot to bounce back here. But again, the market read disagrees with me. I hate when the market is disagreeing with me on all these games. Flipping Utah from the plus 105 dog to a minus 117 favorite, 79% of the cash on them. 54% of tickets coming in on the Devils. I don't agree with it, man. I don't know what else to tell you. But that's what we got going on in hockey. And then we have a short NBA slate, and you're really going to love this one, man. The NBA play that I have today is this first game up. It is the worst game imaginable. I'm going to play on the Washington Wizards +4, but I'm fading a terrible team in the Hornets. The Hornets are down from 4 with reduced juice. 80% of the tickets coming in on the Hornets. The Hornets actually public after they've at least kind of turned it around a little bit after that awful stretch of 3 games where they lost by ridiculous amounts of points. But 72% of the cash coming in on the Wizards. It looks like the money is coming into the Wizards. I don't like this spot for Charlotte at all for a multitude of reasons. I think this is just an awful spot for so many reasons. They're returning home from a road trip, which they've been on since coming out of the All-Star break. So coming out of the All-Star break, they beat LA. They beat the Lakers on the road, which is a ridiculous win against LA, where I think they had Doncic for the first time in that game. And Charlotte somehow was able to win the game and then lost every other game on the road trip. But they've been facing a jammed schedule, man. This is going to be their 7th game in the last, 10 or 11 days. I mean, that is just a jammed schedule, and every single one of them in different cities. And they kind of bookended the road trip with their 2 best performances of the road trip, beating the Lakers as a huge underdog, and then winning for me as an underdog, actually covering. They were double-digit underdogs, I think, and they actually only lost by 7. I thought it was closer to the spread than that, but it wasn't. Charlotte was actually in that game towards the end. They're actually only losing by a couple points near the end of the game. So Charlotte was able to play really well against Dallas to finish that road trip. So they bookended the road trip against the 2 teams that were involved in the Doncic trade, and Charlotte was able to play well against both of those. In the middle of the road trip, they faced Denver, very difficult team. Golden State, very difficult team, but they lost those 3 games in the middle to Portland, Sacramento, Golden State by a combined 131 points in 3 games. The worst 3-game combined loss margin, I think, in NBA history. Absolutely insane. So I jumped in on them finally. They did bounce back, had a good game against Dallas, but now I think this is going to be a bad spotting for them as they're returning home from a road trip. Even if it's a bad road trip, a lot of times you get distracted when you return home. You've been on the road for so long. You got to get back involved with the home stuff that you have to do at home. Sorry, I'm distracted by UNC and Miami. Isn't that such a great game? UNC is probably a double-digit favorite here at home in Chapel Hill because Miami is so bad. And UNC needs to win because I have them in the first 4 out right now. I have them close to being in the tournament right now. So anyway, Charlotte, again, you return home. You're going to be distracted by the things you have to do at home. And who do they have up next after this bad Washington team that they likely won't pay much attention to, even though, it is actually technically a revenge spot as Charlotte lost to Washington on February 3rd at home. But they got Golden State, Minnesota, Cleveland all up next. And Golden State, they just lost to in the second to last game on the road trip. So they might not even remember this Washington game, man. I like Washington. This is a really bad spot for Charlotte. Washington, I don't think the revenge yet really matters that much. Again, Washington, they've played significantly fewer games in that stretch, man. We just showed you Charlotte has played 6 games already coming out of the All-Star break, and Washington has only played 4. So they are much more rested here. And they've only had 1 road trip down to Orlando. And now, after being back home, now they're just traveling down to Charlotte. It is so much the easier spot. And they're coming off a loss to Portland. Washington actually hasn't really played that badly in some of these recent games. They took Indiana to overtime going into the All-Star break, played Milwaukee tough coming out of the All-Star break, beat Brooklyn, which I think was kind of a bad spot for Brooklyn, if I remember correctly. And I liked Washington in that one. And they played decently against Portland, too. So this Washington team, I think they're still trying. I think both teams are, but Charlotte just had some games where they just got totally annihilated. So I don't know, man. The spot is way better for Washington. It's a terrible spot for a terrible team in Charlotte. So give me Washington to that one. Yeah, oh my God. Sacramento and Houston. I mean, this game is one of the better games here of the day. Sacramento, they just beat Utah. Now they're coming back down out of elevation, though, after beating Utah. But I think they're still going to show up. I mean, this is a big game. Houston's one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Houston maybe in a little bit of a better spot because they're staying at home. And we know Houston's quite good at home. They've been taking care of business in most of these home games recently. Houston did just lose to Utah, so people might see that and think, well, wait a minute. Sacramento just beat Utah on the road. Houston lost them on the road. So does that mean we should take the points with Sacramento here? I don't really think so. Houston does have Oklahoma City up next, so I don't think they're really going to overlook this Sacramento team, who's not really that bad a team either. Houston, like I said, they've been playing better at home. They've had a couple of days off, and they're kind of just staying at home. They're 20-9 at home. They've been playing pretty well at home. It would be Houston or pass. They're up from 4.5 to 5 with juice, but 84% of tickets and only 83% of the cash on them. So the cash percentage isn't on them, but I don't know what I think about that. And Memphis has just owned San Antonio recently. They've won the last 3 games against San Antonio, I believe, and now San Antonio is without Wemba as well. But Memphis in this one is coming off a couple of tough games. So they played Cleveland close, returned home from a road trip and won in overtime against Phoenix, a barn burner, crazy game. Then they lost by 1 to the New York Knicks, who are a pretty good team as well. Getting upset, though, Memphis did. And now they're turning around and they got San Antonio. So does that mean Memphis is going to be refocused? Or does that mean they're going to be hung over from 3 big games and not pay attention to a team that, well, if we can crush this team without Wemba, we're obviously going to annihilate them even more when they don't have him, right? If we can crush them when they have him. So I don't know. San Antonio, they're probably at least trying to salvage one game from the road trip. They had a couple of days off to try to break this losing momentum here. So maybe it's a better spot for San Antonio here to maybe get some revenge. The line's actually down from 11 to 9, but 86% of the cash on the Grizzlies. 50% of the tickets evenly split. So that line move might not be actually because of the money, which looks like it's coming in on the Grizzlies. The line move might actually be because of the personnel or something. I don't know. You might have to look, but I'm not playing this game. So maybe San Antonio, maybe Memphis has some guys that aren't playing in this game. I don't really know. We can see here, actually. Doesn't really look like it according to this, so I don't know. We'll see. And then we have Golden State at Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, it has just been announced that Joel Embiid will not return this season. And this, unfortunately for everybody, is the ABC game of the night, primetime at 8:30 p.m. Nobody's going to want to see this. Philadelphia, I mean, they're not winning without Embiid, but maybe Embiid, like the fact that you now know he's going to be out might actually be a positive for Philadelphia because now there's no question anymore. It's like we know he's going to be out. We know this is our lineup from now on. Let's get used to it. Let's get some chemistry. Let's go. So I can see some aspects of this that are better for Philadelphia now. They do have a couple of days off to try to break this awful losing streak. 9 losses in a row or something, but they did play close on the road at the Knicks and almost were able to pull off that win. So they're coming off a big game, but they're still going to be focusing against Golden State, you would imagine. And Golden State has been rolling since they got Jimmy Butler. And this may be a game they'll overlook because Philly has just sucked so bad. But Golden State just beat Orlando, which isn't really an impressive win. And they do have Charlotte up next, which they already just beat Charlotte. So that's not a big game either. So it's not really a bad spot for the Warriors either. Warriors up from 7 to 8.5. 59% of tickets, 91% of the cash coming in on the Warriors. So the money's coming in on the Warriors. And then we do a Bucks-Mavs. Bucks sitting at a 3.5-point road favorite. 80% of the cash coming into the Bucks. 55% of tickets coming into Dallas. Dallas looks public. It looks like the public might think, oh, well, both these teams are just kind of okay. And getting points with the Mavs at home kind of looks tempting maybe when it should be kind of a competitive matchup between decent teams. I don't know. Dallas, I mean, coming off Charlotte, I mean, that's not a big win. They didn't cover, so they should be focused on this game against Milwaukee, but Milwaukee is the better team, as the odds makers are telling you, and they're finally playing with a full complement of players, too. But Milwaukee did just beat Denver, so I don't agree with where the cash is right now. You just beat Denver. You played a close game against Houston the game before that. Beating Denver is big. Now you're going out on the road. Yeah, and when you go out on the road, you do want to be focused to start the road trip, but could be a bit of a letdown off of that big game against Denver. So I don't know, man. And now we got in this game the injury concerns. I don't even know what the injury concerns are in this game. It looks like Lillard is out for the Bucks, but somehow there's still lane points on the road. Lillard and Giannis are both game time decisions again. So based on that line, I guess they're probably both playing in this game. And then Mavs, PJ Washington may return in this game. We'll see what happens with that. That's really a kind of somewhat significant injury going on there, but that's going to do it, man. Not a whole lot going on there. Situationally, I would kind of lean to the Dallas side in that one. But my plays one more time. Penn State plus 5.5 in college basketball, which is already off and running and probably losing. VMI plus 9.5 or whatever the best number is on that. Fairleigh Dickinson money line minus 115. USC plus 7.5. Houston Christian plus 4. UC Santa Barbara plus 5.5. Wyoming plus 7.5. Baylor minus 13.5. West Virginia plus 10.5 or whatever it is now. Hockey, New York Islanders minus 140. Detroit minus 110. NBA, Washington plus 4. That's going to do it. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. Tower Gang, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get bonus content, 2.5-hour video, absolute insanity, baby. I thought it was going to be done by noon, not even close. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Again, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get live bonus content from us. Not even just live, just bonus content. So go do it. Peace out, everybody.